Majestic flags made in noble colors open the curtain of history. They close the stone castle in which history will begin. The main character appears in a noble-colored dress. She has snow-white skin and ashen hair, and she elegantly holds a porcelain bowl. The princess suddenly opens her eyes and looks menacingly at her maids, thereby making them flinch in fear. The sight of the maids afraid of the main character amuses her, and she laughs loudly. One of the maids cannot stand the tense situation and drops an expensive cup on the ground. The main character approaches the maid and raises her head with a fan, noticing that the girl has only recently started working in the castle. The princess smiles affectionately at the maid, as if calming her down and forgiving her for the broken cup. However, the next moment, the face of the new maid ends up on the fragments of the cup. It was the main character who brutally hit her on the ground. The maid raises her head, waking up from the blow. Her face is all covered in cuts. There is now a lot of blood on the ground. The girl is in tears. Throwing away the fan, the main character leaves the maid, saying that she has a good appearance, but it does not correspond to her mental development. She again turns to face the girl and addresses her, calling her Aisha. Aisha covers her mouth with her hand in horror, and now the realization comes to her that her mistress knows her name. The main character grins and says that she hates it when bugs disturb her peace during afternoon tea. The maid cannot utter a sound. The words are stuck in her throat. The only thing she hears is the frantic beating of her heart. The heroine shows her nature. She shouts at the helpless maid, reproaching her for the fact that the tea was not the same temperature as her lips. The villainess specifically steps into the place where the maid's hand lies, piercing it, and blood begins to flow out of it non-stop. A cry of pain involuntarily escapes from Aisha's mouth. Tears instantly appear in her eyes. While the main character is shouting curses at the whole area, the maid Amelia is shaking with anger. At one point, Amelia pushes her princess, and her exquisite crown with emerald stones begins to fall off. The maid screams at the girl and wishes her death for the way she treats innocent palace workers. The main character falls to the ground, hitting her head. The clap made by a closed book interrupts the story told to us earlier. The action moves to a dance studio, where the dancers are discussing who will get the role of the villain for the final dance. Ella, a girl with a beautiful appearance, flowing ashen hair and a slender figure, becomes a volunteer. The dance director asks the girl about her decision, since previously she was supposed to play the main positive role. Ella is not going to refuse such a wonderful opportunity to test herself. The choreographer accepts the girl's decision to challenge herself and wishes her luck. The heroine reflects on her past, when she did only as her father wanted, and what she has achieved now, when she is trying to become a professional actress. The dancers leave the training room, but Ella decides to stay to practice some more. The girl is left alone. She rehearses the role of the tyrant, trying to express the emotions and intonations of the hero as believably as possible. Coming out of character, Ella sighs in disappointment, rubbing the back of her head. While the heroine is wondering what she needs to become a villain, a dark figure appears behind her. Before she finishes the last line from the script, Ella is pushed by a mysterious silhouette. The girl quickly falls from the chair on which she was rehearsing, and only at the last moment notices that this is not an accident. Ella sharply opens her eyes, inside of which it is as if one can see echoes of distant space and twinkling stars. Turning around, she angrily screams and asks who pushed her and almost killed her. However, instead of a dance studio and a mysterious offender, she finds herself in a beautiful garden, seeing only a couple of maids in front of her. Ella's eyebrows fly up, her eyes widen, and her mouth opens slightly in confusion as to how she ended up in this place. Aisha runs to the princess and grabs her by the hem of her dress, saying that everything that happened is her fault and asking for punishment. However, Amelia stops her and admits that it was she who pushed the mistress. The girl is ready to be executed for her offense. The princess, represented by Ella, stops the maid's confessions with a scream. Ella tries to figure out what's going on here, seeing how the maid is covering Aisha with herself, trying to protect her. The actress begins to understand something and looks around, studying the area and surroundings. The princess points her finger at the maids and repeats their names questioningly. Then the girl points her finger at herself and clarifies to the servants that she is a princess and is now in Adalante. Ella begins to remember the plot of the book. which she was supposed to use to choreograph the dance. The girl remembers that the royal family died as a result of food poisoning that was spoiled by the servants. Ella finally realizes that she has been transported to the future. She is very frightened by the thought that she has found herself in a bloody old fairy tale. The actress's legs can no longer withstand the tension, and she sinks to the floor. Ella covers her eyes with her hand, realizing that this is the beginning of her hell. The heroine thinks about the plot of the story in which she finds herself, that the truth of the death of the kingdom of Adalante is covered in darkness, and no one knows the truth. The girl turns away from the servants, drawing her legs closer to herself and wondering whether she should fall again in order to return back to her world. Someone calls Her Highness, but his voice is so loud that even the cat jumps up in fright. The source of the scream turns out to be the palace guards who have come to save the princess. They cross their swords near the throats of the maids. The commander of the royal guard, Pilir, loudly shouts at the servants, threatening to kill them for attempting to kill a member of the royal family. Ella gets scared when she hears the commander's threat and screams for them not to kill the maids. Pilir is surprised by his mistress's reaction and asks whether he should carry out a more brutal execution by preparing the horses for quartering. The heroine feels bad thinking about how the horses will tear the servants to shreds. Still nauseous, Ella yells at the royal guards, ordering them to stop. The commander's gaze becomes harsher and more suspicious due to the princess's strange behavior. The girl understands that she behaves completely differently from the main character, and if everyone understands that she's a stranger, it could cost her life. Ella makes her look more indifferent and orders the guards to lock up the servants until she comes up with a more painful reprisal. Pilir enthusiastically claps the princess for her composure and the horror that she knows how to instill in people. The princess leaves, ordering the maids to be detained, but the commander asks her where she is going. A stern look is directed at the man. The princess irritably asks him if she should report to a lower person. Pilir bows to the princess, saying that he has exceeded his authority. Her Highness finally leaves with her head held high. The commander-in-chief raises his head and a wry grin appears on his face. Meanwhile, Ella rushes through the entire garden, trying to quickly leave the scene. The girl runs to a clearing and leans against a tree, trying to catch her breath. To breathe easier, the heroine takes off all her heavy jewelry and outerwear. Ella lies down on the black blanket, mistaking it for a picnic tablecloth, and finally enjoys the silence. Something twitches under the girl's head, but the heroine thinks that these are stones. The actress sighs and begins to think out loud about returning to her world, whether it is possible. Full of determination, the princess jumps up and exclaims that she must survive. Ella remembers the ending, in which both handmaids die that evening, and the entire royal family and she will be fatally poisoned. Looking at the sky, the girl realizes that she still has half a day left before nightfall, and during this time she needs to find the killer in order to survive. The princess lies back down, but this time she bumps into someone's lap, and a man towers over her. Ella sees in front of her a handsome man with emerald eyes and ashen hair. A blush appears on the girl's face from the attractive appearance of the man. The characters look at each other intently, one with surprise, the other with interest. The stranger asks the lady to get off his feet. Ella immediately jumps up and apologizes for disturbing her, to which the man asks for forgiveness for disturbing her sleep. The girl says that the ash-haired man should not worry, but inside she feels that she is about to die from the intelligence of the stranger. Finally, the princess realizes that the man was here all along and heard everything she said about the extermination of the royal family. It's as if something hits the heroine's head, and her eyes widen when the stranger confirms her fears. The ash-haired man distracts the girl from her thoughts by getting down on one knee in front of her. The man introduces himself as Alan and says that he wants to serve the lady. The man also mentions that he has excellent knowledge of local cuisine. The girl freezes at Alan's words and tries to understand what just happened. The heroes find themselves inside the palace. Ella covers her face with her hand, thinking that beauty is misleading. The princess was so lost in her thoughts that she did not notice how Alan stopped and therefore crashed into his back. Rubbing her nose from the hard blow, Ella apologizes for her carelessness. The man turns to the princess and, smiling, says that it is an honor for him to touch her at least for a short time. At the man's words, the heroine's face flushes again with embarrassment. Alan leads the girl to the door leading to the kitchen. The door opens sharply and a body flies out of it, and in the doorway itself stands a silhouette holding a cane. The silhouette turns out to be a man dressed in a chef's suit, his face distorted with anger. The chef hits the boy with his cane for his poor cooking skills and asks if he is really ready to serve this to his royal family. Ella thinks in a whisper about the chef's words and looks for subtext in them, since in his statement he compared the food of pigs and the authorities. The girl turns to Alan to get his opinion on the situation, but he is not in his previous place. The heroine turns back as soon as she hears the voice of a boy trying to defend himself from the cook's attacks. The man is not happy that he will be contradicted and therefore swings at the child, intending to beat him with his cane. The boy's face contorts with anger, but he does not close his amber eyes, showing courage before striking. The cane, which recently flew at the boy, flies out of the cook's hands. Ella covers the child with her back. The man's eyes widen. The main character's name comes out of his mouth, but he doesn't have time to finish it. The girl grabs the boy's hand and tells him to run away from here with her. The young chef's eyes are no longer filled with anger. They reflect loss. Looking at the savior, the image of some girl named Liliana pops up in the blonde man's memory. From the memories of the girl, the boy's legs give way and he falls. Without getting up, the boy raises his head and now he has only one word in his thoughts: little sister. The cook was still standing in the same place where the heroes left him and was trying to figure out whether Princess Ella was the boy's savior. Someone appears behind the man and asks if he is surprised by Her Highness's behavior. Startled, the cook turns sharply to the source of the voice. The kitchen manager tries to hit the intruder with his wooden leg, but he parries the blow with his sword. The chef's name is Papati. He served in the past and is a former lieutenant general, and the stranger turns out to be Alan. Smiling, Alan asks the chef why he is angry and whether the wine he brought last time is to blame for this mood. After the ash-haired man's words, the taste of that wine that he would be glad to quickly forget appears on the cook's tongue. The boss shouts at Alan not to remind him of that black liquid anymore. The man, in turn, says that he apparently mixed up the bottles. Alan smiles again and says that the drink was made from medicinal herbs and was good for the former lieutenant general's wounds. Papati starts shouting even louder at the ash-haired man and says that he wants regular wine. With a chuckle, the cook turns away from Alan and asks why he is here, also warning that he will no longer give crystal apples for offering. The cook safely hid the apples in the safe so that no one else but him could use them. The memory of the taste of apples makes Papati salivate and laughs mischievously. Alan grins at the cook's reaction and says that he came not for the apples, but because he had something more attractive. The men turn their heads in the direction where the princess recently ran away. Papati breaks into a smile, and his gaze becomes more cunning. He asks if the guy saw what just happened. The chef thoughtfully says that the princess is behaving unusually today, and the ash-haired man tells him that it is because of him that she got lost. At Alan's words, the man turns sharply towards him. The guy, in turn, smiles innocently. Papati exclaims enthusiastically that Alan is meeting with Her Highness, and the ash-haired man asks him to be quieter. A sly smile spreads across the guy's face. He says that the most interesting things are yet to come. Meanwhile, Ella sits next to the crying child, not knowing what to do. The girl does not understand how to calm the boy, who is crying incessantly. When the princess tries to say something to the boy, he only begins to shed more tears. The boy's tears flow without stopping. Ella begins to panic, not understanding what to do. At some point, the girl accepted her helplessness next to the child, feeling that she would also cry. After 10 minutes, the child finally calms down and apologizes for his behavior. The actress turns her head towards the child and clarifies whether he has definitely finished crying. The child is embarrassed, either because of his behavior or because of the girl's beauty. Ella gets up from the floor and tells the boy, since he has calmed down, she will go. The fair-haired one thanks her. However, the boy's hand pulls the bottom of the princess's shirt, asking her to stop. Ella turns around in surprise and looks at the child. The boy, like a puppy, asks the girl to stay with him for a while longer, since she resembles his sister. The princess agrees to stay, but only on the condition that the fair-haired man stops crying. The characters sit next to each other on the floor in complete silence. A slight awkwardness is felt. Ella contemplates returning to the place they fled from, since the boy is working in the kitchen. The The blonde interrupts the princess's train of thought and asks if she is a servant here, like him. The child claims that she is definitely a servant, since everything was taken away from her, just like him. But he reassures Ella, because soon everything will be over. The actress asks the boy what he means. He says that we are talking about the royal family, which is cruel to the people. The boy smiles evilly, saying that soon the royal family will finally disappear. The princess feels uneasy at the idea that she could soon become a corpse. In her heart, she wants to shake information out of the boy. The maid arrives to defuse the situation. She invites Her Highness to dinner with the king. When the boy heard the servants name the girl, he realized that all this time he had been informally communicating with Princess Ella. Blonde stutters as he pronounces Ella's title. She realizes that her secret has been revealed. The princess tries to reassure the young cook, saying that some mistake has occurred and extends her hand to him. The boy is very angry and therefore throws her hand away from him. The child yells at Ella and blames her for everything, wishing the royal family dead. Ella tries to calm the boy down and stop him, but he doesn't listen to her and runs away. The maid hurries the princess to the king, noticing that she is walking around in only a nightgown. The action moves to the dining room, where the entire royal family has gathered. Eldest Prince Mo Tyler notices that in addition to the royal family, a sage is present at the dinner. The sage replies that he is present here at the invitation of His Majesty, and it is an honor for him to sit at the same table with him. Princess Ella arrives in the hall. Smiling, she apologizes to her father for being late. His Majesty accepts the apology and invites the princess to quickly sit down at the table. Ella raises her concentrated gaze and looks at her father. The girl remembers that King Hiram Adalante always pampers his princess very much, and he also has 4 sons. This time, Ella looks from her father to the invited guest. The heroine sees a man sitting in an elegant outfit and with a mask that hides half of his face. The older brother asks Ella if she is as surprised as he is that a wise man has decided to attend their family dinner. At the same moment, the princess remembers that it was the sage Sabotage who led the rebels and decided to execute Ella by hanging her. The heroine is horrified by thoughts of execution and once again decides that she must survive. Ella looks with concern at the man sitting at the table with a predatory smile. Tyler tries to pull the girl out of her thoughts by waving his hand in front of her. However, the princess cannot take her eyes off the sage veil. The man suddenly gets up from the table. From such actions of a man, the heroine takes a defensive stance and turns to Vale, loudly asking what he is up to. Tyler gets angry at his sister and angrily tells her that the princess can't behave like that. The sage laughs cheerfully, saying that the princess apparently is not happy with him. Ella shudders and begins to deny the man's words. The sage quickly walks towards the heroine, which makes her very scared. The man takes Her Highness by the chin and gently pulls her towards him. The king calls the sage by name and asks him not to take the young girl's words too seriously. Sabotage seems to envelop him and the princess with his predatory aura, making the girl feel helpless. The sage turns slightly to His Majesty and tells him not to worry about it. From such a heavy aura, sweat appears on the king's face, and his eyes widen in fear. However, in the next moment, fear gives way to humility, and Hiram Adalante averts his gaze. The first prince is angry at the sage's behavior, the third only chuckles, the second trembles in fear, but the fourth does not react at all. His Majesty, drooping, agrees for Vale to speak with the princess. The sage turns to Ella and asks her if the rumors are true. The man squeezes the girl's cheeks too much that she begins to speak stammeringly and asks what rumors she's talking about. Vale closes the distance between the heroes and says that we are talking about the princess falling in love with him. Without hesitation, the girl gives a strong slap to the man. Ella hit the sage so hard that he even started bleeding. There was deathly silence in the hall. All the brothers tensed in anticipation of what would happen next. Even the youngest stopped reading the book. Vale grins at the princess's action and wipes the blood from her lips. The heroine looks at the man with contempt, caustically pronouncing his name and demands that he leave. Otherwise, the kingdom will declare war on Adalante. Concentrated, looking at the princess, he sees how she quickly changed from a frightened lamb into a proud lioness. Smiling slyly, the sage exhales and licks the blood from his lower lip with his tongue. Sabotage bows gracefully to Ella, but at the same time tries to intimidate her by enveloping her in his snake aura. The man's eyes turn into the eyes of a mad predator who is ready to attack his prey at any moment. The sage leans towards the girl and points out the tone she should not use towards him. Ignoring Vale's words, the heroine silently walks forward, leaving the man behind her. The sage heads out of the dining room, shouting that since the princess does not want to see him, then so be it. The king breathes a sigh of relief after Sawoil leaves. Hiram says his daughter's name, wanting to discuss what happened, but Ella interrupts him. The princess looks at the king like a child, saying that he again forgot to ask to remove the green pepper from the food. The man is speechless at how quickly his daughter has transformed. Tyler sneers at his majesty, saying that he is amazed that the king has the courage to rule the country. The third brother, Ka Liam, retorts to the older brother that he is competing with the woman for the king's blessing, and the brothers begin to argue. The king is annoyed by the brothers' bickering and demands that they stop, saying that Ella is young and should be taken care of by her family. Ella stops his majesty, hitting the table with her hand. The girl tells her father that she is finished and will go, but he is worried that she has not eaten anything. When the heroine leaves, the king scolds the brothers for quarreling at the table and says that since Ella has not eaten, it may affect her health. Moving away from the dining room, the heroine sinks to the floor. Tears come from her eyes. She is scared. On the way to her room, Ella's head was constantly spinning due to the stress she had experienced. Approaching the bed, the actress's body barely moved, and it constantly intended to fall. Finally, the girl falls on the bed, burying her face in the pillow, and says that she was very scared of the man in the mask. Ella remembers how she felt in front of the sage. It seemed to her that she was a mouse caught in a beast's mousetrap. The girl opens her eyes after remembering Sawile, now worried that he suspected something. However, after the terrible memories, the heroine has a picture in her head when the sage came very close to her face. The princess hits herself on the cheek, forcing her to come to her senses from such thoughts. Then Ella convinces herself that since he is from the distant past, he cannot know about the movements and it was just a provocation. Lying in bed, the girl thinks about what happened, about her father, brothers, and whether next time she will be able to deceive the sage. Waving her arms and legs, Ella is angry that there was too little description of the royal family in the book. Having calmed down, the heroine gets out of bed, using her flexibility and grace. The princess decides that let everything take its course, but she cannot know for sure whether she will survive or not, and goes to inspect the entire palace. Full of strength and energy again, Ella goes to explore the palace. The door to the kitchen opens slightly and someone walks in. The stranger approaches the products from which dishes are prepared for the royal family and sprinkles them with some kind of poison. However, upon hearing a voice warning him not to do this, the culprit drops the bag of poison. The intruder turns out to be the same boy whom the cook wanted to beat. His amber eyes look fearfully at the newcomer. Ella stands in the doorway and looks at the child, saying that she knows that he is a good person, and the role of a criminal does not suit him. The boy only gets angrier at the princess's words and says that he wants to poison the royal family because he belongs in hell, just like him. Ella stops the young cook and says that if he did this often, he would know that he needs to add poison to the prepared food. The boy brushes off the heroine, saying that she is laughing at him. The princess stops him and asks him to tell him what bad she did for him, and then she will try to prove that she has changed. The child looks at her with an arrogant look, saying that a commoner does not dare talk to the nobility. Ella stops the boy again, but this time she covers his mouth with both hands. The princess smiles friendly at the young man and mentions his sister, as he previously spoke about their similarity. The image of his sister instantly pops up in the boy's head. Tears come out of the young chef's eyes when he remembers Liliana. The boy's body weakened. The strength in his hands disappeared. Ella no longer held him. The young man's legs weaken, and he falls onto the hard floor with a loud sound. The boy's eyes quickly fill with tears, and he silently apologizes to his sister for the fact that no one could save her. Sometime in the past, the commander of the royal guard came to the boy's house, demanding that his father pay taxes on behalf of the princess. On that fateful day, the mother did her best to protect her child, holding him to her chest. However, the boy still clearly remembered how Pilir hit his father's jaw with his knee, ordering the guards to make a slave out of his son. The guard grabs the child and drags him away from the house. The boy extends his hand forward in the hope that his parents will save him. The blond man's arms were spread apart and secured with belts. His head was also fixed, and a red-hot seal rose above the child. Clutching the piece of wood between his teeth, the future slave screamed in extreme pain. The young chef lifts the hair at the back of his head to show off his scar. The boy says that because of her, he was branded and made a slave, and the same thing awaits his family in the future. The young man looks at Ella with all the pain, hatred, and resentment that have been accumulating all this time. The mark in the form of a sea reptile is the sign of the slaves of Adalante. Slaves are the legal property of their owner, and their owners can do whatever they want with them. The princess approaches the fair-haired one, extending her hand to his scar. Seeing that the boy is scared but does not move away, the girl decides to touch the brand with her fingertips. Amber eyes look fearfully and warily at the heroine. Ella reflects that an innocent child has become a slave against his will, and she sadly asks if he is in pain. Instantly, the heroine realizes that she said something stupid, and it was, of course, very painful for him. The boy, gritting his teeth, boils his head off her. The princess apologizes and says that she knows that she cannot earn forgiveness. With a worried look, the girl looks at the back of the boy's head and asks to give her a chance to atone. The young man's hair covers his eyes, from which bitter tears flow. Without waiting for the boy's answer, Ella lifts him up the way a mother cat lifts her kittens by the scruff of the neck. The princess says that even if the blonde one answers her no, she still has to do something, and they leave the kitchen together. Alana, who was watching this picture from the side, smiles as she looks at them. The man wonders how many more surprises the heroine will present. At the construction site of the Colosseum, a fat master beats his slave, demanding that he get up from the ground and continue working. His wife runs up to the slave and asks the owner to stop beating him with the whip, since he is sick. The man says that it would be better for the slave to die and not spend the princess's money on providing for them, and orders the woman to leave. However, the wife does not leave her husband and covers him with her back, waiting for the blow. The whip does not have time to hit the woman, as someone's bracelet gets caught in the handle of the whip. The whip falls from the owner's hands to the ground, causing him to freeze in shock. The gentleman turns in the direction from which the decoration came, threateningly asking who is tired of living in this world. Frowning her eyebrows, the princess says that it looks like the man doesn't value life if he talks to her like that. The young cook runs up to the woman who recently defended her husband, calling her mom, and she calls him by his name, Jack. Jack, with tears in his eyes, tells his mother not to worry anymore, because now they have a chance to survive. Mother and son look hopefully at the princess, in front of whom the slave master is kneeling. The heroine scolds the man, saying that since he spoke to her so impudently, he is ready to accept the consequences. A man on his knees beats his head on the ground, begging for mercy. The girl chuckles, seeing his pathetic behavior. The princess looks away and notices the slaves who are looking at her with curiosity. Ella notices that all the slaves are so thin that their bones are visible. The princess's fists clench tightly at such a sight. Realizing who makes people look like this, the heroine hits the man on the head with her heel. Ella notices a sword next to her. Pulling it out, the girl points the tip towards the owner of the slaves, saying that for his cruelty, he must be executed at least 100 times. Ella swings her sword. Such actions of the princess make the man very afraid, causing his face to become covered with drops of sweat. A stream flowing along the ground appears between the man's legs. However, Ella did not want to chop the master of the slaves into pieces. She swung her hand to cut the woman's chain, but the chain did not break. The edge of the sword turned out to be not sharp enough for this. After an unsuccessful attempt, Her Highness throws away the sword, saying that it is as worthless as its owner. In her heart, the princess laughs out of awkwardness, because in the movies it seemed easier to do, and she didn't think that her arm would hurt so much. Holding her sore hand, Ella orders the guards to remove the shackles from the slaves. Jack's mother looks hopefully at the guardsman and asks him if they can leave now, but the guy does not dare answer. Then the heroine decisively says that the slaves are free and can now return home and live happily. The boy looks at the princess in disbelief after her words about their freedom. Jack falls to his knees, as does his mother, who bows to the floor to the girl for their release. The woman grabs her son's hands, saying that now they can return home, but he still cannot move away from Her Highness's words. The princess smiles contentedly as she finally sees a happy picture. However, when the girl turns around, she sees the predatory glances of the slaves directed at her. Hoping to be freed, the girl with light purple hair falls in front of the heroine, saying that she will do anything for her. The slaves simultaneously fall to their knees in a deep bow, begging the princess to remove their shackles too. Ella looks with pity at all the slaves who so desperately want to gain freedom. The girl remembers how she used to admire the grandeur of ancient buildings, but in fact, behind them, there is only the suffering of people. The actress really wants to tell them that they are all free, but she cannot, because she understands that they have nowhere to go. The princess understands that if she gives them the land, the nobles will take it back by force. Ella is angry because she doesn't know what the right thing to do in this situation is right. However, the girl turns around and realizes that she is in the Colosseum, and a solution to the problem comes to her. The heroine approaches a girl with purple hair and asks her if she can dance. She answers positively. Ella smiles happily because she understands that then she will be able to implement the idea. In His Majesty's office, Ella's elder brother conveys to the king that his sister's actions are a disgrace to their family. The father is angry at his son's words, and he says that since his daughter did this, it means it was necessary. Tyler sits down on the couch, disappointed and angry. However, after a second, a sly smile appears on his face. The youngest brother, Terrence, notices this, but decides not to interfere and continues reading the book. Alan lies carefree on the grass in the garden with a book on his face. Next to him, a servant on his knee reports news about Princess Ella. Hearing the news that Ella is going to make a theater instead of the Colosseum, the man puts the book away. Together with the servants, the heroine returns to the slaves. People greet Ella in silence, frozen in anticipation. Jack goes to Her Highness and says that, as she asked, he gathered all the slaves, but asks why she needs this. Instead of answering, the girl claps her hands, calling the servants. The servants hand the slaves trays of cloth and a chest. The heroine entrusts these people with the reconstruction of this place and says that she has high hopes for them. Jack's family and he himself exclaim in surprise. The girl distributes tasks to the husband and wife so that they can monitor the work of the men and women. Ella smiles and thinks for a couple of seconds about who to make manager. The princess approaches Jack, puts her hands on his shoulders, and entrusts him with the management of the theater. Waking up after the heroine's words, the young man begins to wave his arms, saying that he doesn't know how to do anything and therefore won't be able to lead. Ella puts her index finger to his lips, silencing him. The heroine looks at him worriedly, asking if he wants to continue to suffer in hard labor. The boy retreats, taking a step back, after the princess's words. The girl makes a serious look and tells Jack that in this life only he can help himself. The boy has a memory of the day when he was separated from his family. He doesn't want to suffer anymore, and for this he needs to be strong. Tearful but filled with confidence, Jack shouts that he will become stronger. Ella is amazed at the young man's bold answer. The girl smiles and praises the boy and strokes his head. The princess claps and asks for a moment of attention. The heroine announces that from now on, people are no longer slaves, and the theater is their salvation, and the more successful it is, the more they will be paid. The princess says that they can stay and participate in the creation of the theater, and if they don't want to, then they are free. When everyone is left, Ella smiles happily, and meanwhile, Jack reflects that he almost killed their savior. The boy clenches his hands into fists. He feels that he wants to thank and protect the princess for everything she has done for him. The young man shouts to the girl that he will not disappoint her. The freedmen work hard to create a stage for the plays. The women, in turn, sew costumes for the actors. Faye, a girl with purple hair, is entrusted by the princess with training dancers. The next day, Jack runs up to Ella and tells her that the costumes are ready. The heroine is glad that the women were able to complete the task so quickly and invites the young man to look at the costumes together. Metal pipes smash the scenery into splinters. Jack tells the trespassers to stop destroying everything. From the sidelines, the second son of the Marquis, Leon Fond, is watching what is happening with a smug smile. Jack's father falls at his feet, clinging to his clothes, and asks him to stop and discuss everything. The second heir of the Marquis kicks Jack's father in the chest. The son runs up to the man, presses his legs to his stomach, trying to relieve the pain from the push. Angry at Leon, the boy takes a pipe from the ground and angrily swings at him. However, Jack is hit from behind by one of the servants of the Marquis's son. The second servant pierces the boy's leg with an arrow. The young man's face is lifted by the chin, showing it to Leon, who calls him Princess Ella's favorite. Jack tears out his face and angrily shouts at the blonde that he has no right to insult Her Highness. For the boy's words, he is kicked in the face with a boot. Leon throws up his hands and says that he didn't say anything like that, because Ella disgraced her family, and now everything belongs to him. The man holds a golden dagger to the blonde man's throat and says that he will spare his life if he insults the princess. Jack says something, but it comes out slurred due to his swollen cheek. To hear the boy's words, the second son approaches his face. The next moment, Jack spits in Leon's face. The man slams the young man's face into the ground and threatens to cut off his head for spitting. The servant is already begging the pipe over the boy's head to break it. However, the actions of the subordinate are stopped by the arriving princess. She is dressed in an exquisite orange dress, but without shoes. The girl approaches Jack, who is lying on the ground. Seeing the young man's condition, Ella orders a doctor to be brought to him. However, no one dares to move and carry out the order of Her Highness. The worried mother runs up to her child. The princess tells her to take the boy away and find a doctor. Leon looks at the heroine's outfit and asks her if the theater is a cover for lewdness. Hearing this, Ella turns to face the man and says not to devalue other people's work. The girl tells the Marquis's son that he only knows how to spend his parents' money and that he is only good for consuming food. Leon is very angry because of Ella's words, saying that she is only pretending to be kind and merciful. The man continues to escalate the situation and says that even the king is unhappy with her actions. The second son shouts to the slaves that if something happens, everything will be fine with the princess, but they will suffer. Frowning her eyebrows, the princess says that she knows about the king's opinion. Leon narrows his eyes and is glad that the third prince did not lie, that Ella lost the king's support. At the same moment, the king's messenger appears and announces that in the princess's land, she has absolute power. The heroine looks triumphantly at the Marquis's son and says that although his father is not happy, he remains on her side. The action moves to a day ago, when Ella came to her father's office so that he would sign permission to implement her idea. The sage and Tyler enter the room. The king tells his daughter to take a walk in the garden, since he is currently busy with documents. The princess puffs out her cheeks at her father's words. The girl snatches the paper from His Majesty's hands. The heroine says that her question is no less important, and therefore she will not leave until the king helps her. The older brother yells at his sister that she is distracting her father over little things and interfering with his work. Ella turns her head to her father, seeking support. However, she sees his head drooping and turned away from her. The princess returns the document to the table and remembers that the king is a coward and selfish by nature and will not be able to go against the nobility. The girl directs her gaze to the sage. Ella recalls that the nobility of Adalante are divided into aristocrats with titles for merit and into successors of the ancestral line. These two groups are like fire and water and cannot get along with each other. The girl decides to cheat and turns her attention to the sage, telling her father to ask him about her seriousness. Savale raised an eyebrow in surprise. Ella puts on a nervous smile, and her body continues to tremble. The king turns a surprised glance at the sage, asking whether he knew the princess's plans. Vale asks the princess if he should know about her plans. The heroine excitedly says that since the sage always advocates for the prosperity of the country, they are in the same boat. Looking at her father, Ella says that the theater will solve the problem with the uprisings of the people, since they will have something to occupy themselves with. With confidence in her eyes, she asks what the sage thinks about her idea. Tyler looks at his father and sees that he has actually thought about his sister's words. Frowning, the first prince shouts at Ella not to mislead the king. However, Tyler is interrupted by the sage, who says that the princess's words have meaning. Sawile's words cause the king and prince to cry out in surprise. Ella looks at the sage in disbelief, glad that he agreed. The man sits down on the sofa and says that with the stick method, it is necessary to give the carrot. Vale says that with the right decision, the king will begin to be valued more, and this is a much more effective method than violence and threats. Tyler shouts that this is a lie and commoners are not worth such effort. The sister interrupts her brother and says that then the king's tactics are lies, since respect is gained through paying him money. His Majesty stops family disputes. Rubbing the bridge of his nose, the man accepts the sage's wish and therefore approves of his daughter's idea. The father tells his son that there is still room in the eastern part of the city, so he can do it his way. Not understanding what is being said, the girl turns her gaze to the sage, fearing that he is angry with her, since now he is involved in this matter. However, Sawoil only smiles mysteriously at the princess. Ella turns back to her father, starting a conversation about his approval. The king gently stops the heroine, placing his hand on hers, and says that her daughter left her no choice, and the sage will take care of the organization. Glowing with happiness, the princess thanks her father and says that she will run to get ready. When Ella passes by Sawoil, he barely audibly tells her that she now owes him. Without answering the sage, the girl leaves. Standing in the Colosseum, the girl thinks that if the man wants to get even, the soldiers will come to her. Leon says that the people the third prince sent here 2 days ago did not warn him about the king's decree. Ella looks at the man in surprise because of his words about Liam. A messenger approaches the second son of the Marquis and asks him to follow him, since he illegally caused problems for the princess. Leon is nervous and says that he acted on behalf of the third prince, since he promised to make him duke after the coronation. The king's man silences the Marquis's son by stuffing a handkerchief into his mouth. The man begins to list Leon Fonda's crimes and orders him to be taken to stand trial. Having finished his work, the messenger announces that they are leaving. The princess looks happily and gratefully at the king's men leaving. Fea joyfully jumps on the girl, saying that this is simply wonderful news. All the people begin to rejoice and praise Princess Ella. The heroine turns to the people and says that now they can continue working with peace of mind. There are 15 days left before the theater opens. A worried maid runs up to the princess, saying that the beam on which the rope hangs is bent in the middle. Ella clarifies whether they have installed auxiliary supports. The servant answers in the affirmative, but the princess understands that the matter is in the laws of physics. When 10 days remain, the heroine examines the finished costumes for the actors, but her hands begin to shake from the sight of them. One of the seamstresses says that they decided to save a little on materials, since it is the princess's money. Ella is horrified by the sight of the bear's lower part, which should have been voluminous. There are 8 days left before the opening, and the heroine notices that many girls are embarrassed to put on dresses, remaining in their shirts. However, the princess does not allow them to be left, throwing her away. With only 3 days left, she finally sees Jack walking towards her with leaflets in his hands. Ella saw a lot of strange things during the days of preparation, so she thinks that she will not be surprised if she sees coat-tops on the sheets. However, her fears are not confirmed, and she joyfully looks at the young man. There are 4 hours left before the opening. Leaflets announcing the opening of the theater are falling from the sky on the streets of the city. An actor in a bear costume invites everyone to the first performance. Since tickets to the performance are very cheap, many children decide to go to it. Ella's older brother's spy is looking at the crowd of people from around the corner, and he says that he will do everything to ensure that no one gets to the performance. However, someone taps the spy on the shoulder, forcing him to turn around. The next second, the man is lying on the ground. The commander of the nightly detachment stretches his left hand, with which he has just eliminated a criminal, and orders him to be taken away for interrogation. The commander, Corporal Lars, informs his knights that his shift is coming to an end and tells them to continue patrolling the streets without him. A knight with blonde hair asks the other's opinion on the reason for the commander's interest in the theater. Ella wore a tight, awkward smile. The girl sits in front of the sage, who decided to look at the princess. The heroine thinks that Vale decided to return the favor. Silence hangs between both. The man gets up from his chair and approaches the princess, hovering over her. Ella winces at the sage's gaze and satisfied smile. Sawoil asks the princess if she was the one who called the man. The girl clarifies whether she heard correctly that it was at her invitation that he was here. And then the girl realizes that someone familiar to her is standing in front of her. The day before, Ella was looking through documents to understand what was missing for the opening of the theater tomorrow. A maid comes to the princess, informing her that the debut act, consisting of 10 people, is ready to entertain the audience. After the maid's words, Her Highness leaves the room in a hurry. The maid can't keep up with the king's daughter and shouts after her that she hasn't even changed her clothes. Ella runs into the garden, very out of breath, and tells someone that he really came. Alan sits relaxed by a tree and, seeing the lady, rejoices at her arrival. Not listening to the man's advances, the girl approaches his face, asking if he knows about the theater. Sitting away from the heroine, he says that he heard a little about his discovery. Ella happily tells him that she is inviting him to the performance and asks him to bring one of his friends. Sighing, the ash-haired man asks why she's inviting him. The princess replies that this is because she has no more friends besides Alan, and she needs someone who will look after the rowdies. Alan chuckles awkwardly and says he doesn't seem to have a choice. The girl happily asks if the man agrees to go to the theater. The ash-haired one politely bows to the princess and says that he cannot refuse, only that his friend is not quite ordinary. Ella grabs the man's hand and says that it doesn't bother her because she needs a lot of spectators at the opening. The heroine does not take her eyes off Alan but does not utter a word. Narrowing his eyes, Alan asks Her Highness if he really isn't worthy of being her bodyguard. A luxurious carriage arrives on the red carpet. Jack, dressed in a black suit, bows respectfully to the arriving guests. The guests turn out to be the sage and all the princess's brothers, except the first prince. The spies of Ella's elder brother, lost in the crowd, say that Thaler needs to be reported about the arrival of the princes and the sage. The first honored guests of the theater begin to take their seats. The baron with the purchased title, Eliot, notices that the slaves have prepared ordinary wooden chairs for special guests. The third son of the king turns to the sage, offering to go to his palace instead of the performance, but he ignores Liam. Without waiting for any reaction, Liam sits down next to Savail. The guy thinks of the queen's glory, that the support of the sage is very important now, so he needs to establish a connection with him. Finally, the performance begins. The dancers take the stage, performing choreography on the drums. The audience looks at them in admiration, without taking their eyes off. The corporal shares his impressions with the king's envoy, saying that the images of identically dressed girls are beautiful. The prince and the commander of the knights are surprised how the actors manage to move like that. One of the girls with silver hair gracefully dances along with the musical instrument pipa. The sage looks only at the dancer with the pipa with his predatory gaze. A couple of hours before the performance, the man asked Ella if he was worthy of being a bodyguard. She replied that he could just come. Moving his body closer to the princess, he told her that they should trust each other. This time, when Ella looked into the sage's eyes, they were filled not with snake cunning, but with warmth. As he left, the man said that the heroine still owed one more debt. Alan smiles at the memory of that meeting. Next to the sage, the third prince says that the girl with silver hair will be his. However, the masked man interrupts the prince in a low voice, saying that the dancer will be his. Liam's gaze focuses on the girl's face, his eyebrows furrowed. The next moment, the prince jumps up from his seat and calls his sister questioningly. Ella looks at him worriedly, wondering why her brother came here. The princess begins to wonder if Alan brought the prince as his friend. Faya calls the heroine, reminding them that it's time for them to change clothes. The girl begins to worry that they won't be able to cope, as soldiers are coming. Jack looks at the princess worriedly, wondering what is bothering her. But one of the workers calls him, saying that they are looking for him. The boy comes to the place where someone was looking for him and looks around. The young man finds a note lying on the ground. Envoy Felix returns to his place. Jack, in turn, takes off after reading the note, which says that anything can happen. Ella happily sings and dances on stage with the rest of the girls. The third prince turns to the sage and says that the song makes no sense and specifies when they will leave the theater. Alan, without turning his head, says that the performance is not over yet. The man looks intently at the girl singing in the center, wondering how she will cope with the next threat this time. At one moment, everything freezes and Ella's eyes widen in fear. The girl begins to fall from the stage. The princess felt that it was not her legs that failed her, but a push in the back. The heroine turns around to see the culprit. She turns out to be a girl with orange hair from a backup dancer. However, Ella successfully lands in scattered rose petals. Silence reigns in the hall. The princess continues to sing, despite the feeling of anger she feels. People in the audience begin to whisper that this fall was written in the script and looked spectacular. Even the third prince believes these words. saying that it was stupid to include something so shocking in the program. Jack peeks around the corner covered in sweat, worried about Her Highness. Alan looks somewhere to the side, saying that it is not time to relax yet. The top of the stage begins to crack. Backstage, Ella approaches the redhead asking where she is going, to which the girl replies that she doesn't feel well. Smiling kindly, the princess tells her to return quickly because without her, it will not be possible to continue the performance. The girl bows to her and exhales to herself, rejoicing that Her Highness did not notice. The heroine stops her by asking if she likes the jewelry and says that she can take anything from her father's treasury for her labor. The excited girl happily asks if she can take the gemstone necklace. The princess agrees and asks what it looks like. The redhead describes it in detail. The heroine's gaze becomes serious, and she directly asks why she needs this necklace. The dancer begins to make excuses and says that this necklace belongs to her. Ella doesn't believe her and asks how this necklace could belong to a former slave. The redhead nervously replies that she found him. The princess realizes that she is not telling her. The main character orders the employees to capture and lock up the criminal. The former slave sneers at her, saying that she won't be able to lock her up. However, the heroine answers her with the same look and asks if she really thinks that she will buy her provocation. Jack approaches them and tells the redhead that the princess prepared in advance because she knew how many enemies she had made for herself. The young man says that Her Highness predicted a long time ago that something might happen to the props. After the incident, the traitor is taken away, and the girls finish the performance. Ella enters the room and sees that they are waiting for her. The sage calls the girl his princess while sitting elegantly on a chair. The main character quickly enters the room and closes the door. The man sighs and says that, apparently, the princess had long ago guessed about his coming. The princess curtsies and says in an official tone that she is grateful for the sage's help. The masked man does not like Ella's actions. He says that Her Highness can leave the formalities. Alan grabs the girl's hands and pulls her towards him. The sage says that he can accept a joint dinner as gratitude. Ella is embarrassed and angry at the hero's actions. The girl looks into the man's eyes, and they seem somehow familiar to her. Alan pulls the princess closer to him, asking what she wants. The main character becomes too embarrassed, so she quickly moves away from the man. The man also gets up and, passing by, whispers in Ella's ear that they will meet in the evening. The sage stands contentedly outside the door and listens to the princess's curses. Felix tells his master about his nasty interest in Her Highness. Alan doesn't let Felix finish his sentence. Walking behind the gentleman, the guy asks if the princess will come tonight, to which he answers in the affirmative. Hearing how the princess still scolds the sage, the servant begins to doubt it. Someone starts knocking on the door as the princess tries to move away from her encounter with the snake. Jack starts knocking harder on the door and says that the theater is on fire. These words pull Ella out of her thoughts. The heroine looks at the burning scene with a menacing gaze. Jack's father runs up to the girl, offering to leave the extinguishing on them. Ella interrupts him, asking about the state of the firefighting installations. The man says that they are in good condition and the fire will be put out quickly. Moats of water are installed in the floor of the theater to effectively combat fire. Faya approaches the princess with the red-haired girl and says that she wanted to take advantage of the turmoil and escape. Ella turns to them and addresses the criminal, asking who sent her. The girl zealously says that the master will soon save her and that the theater will fall apart sooner or later. The princess, hearing the words about the master, asks the red-haired woman if they are talking about Mo Tyler. The intruder freezes and asks how Her Highness knows about this. Ella says that her brother wants to take over this land, but the theater is preventing him from doing this, so she has no one else to think about. In the evening, the princess is gathered for dinner with the sage. The maid asks to wear her cloak, since going out without it is considered bad manners. The main character gets angry and says that she won't go anywhere. The maid tries to convince her mistress, but she flatly refuses to listen to her. Ella leaves, saying that she has more important things to do in the garden. However, someone grabs her skirt, thereby stopping her. The princess gets angry at this behavior and shouts at the stranger. Another maid finds herself on her knees, begging her to accept the sage's invitation. She begins to cry out of hopelessness. The servant stands behind the prince and tells him that the theater is closed for renovations, and they also need to quickly finish with the dungeon. Tyler tells the servant to inform him about the work in the dungeon when they return. He will sort it out. Ella remembers two maids, Aisha and Emily, who are also important characters in the story. The princess, smiling awkwardly, tells Aisha that if she has something to say, let her say it and not cry. The girl is lifted from the floor by the blonde maid. Aisha tells the mistress to visit Mr. Lark Nuo. Her Highness asks the girl who he is. With tears in her eyes, the maid says that this wonderful man saved many people, including her sisters, from bad people. The girl says that she will do everything for her consent. Ella begins to think about her words, because devotion to an idol is a common occurrence. The princess asks what happened to Lark Nuo. After her Highness's question, the maids look at each other awkwardly. Aisha carefully begins to remind the princess that it was she who sent the man to prison for insulting the royal family. In her thoughts, Ella clutches her head, scolding the former owner of the body for her excessive cruelty. Smiling peacefully, the girl says that since he is such a good person, there was some kind of misunderstanding. Aisha tells the princess that she cannot wait, since Larka is to be hanged that very day. Ella stands in shock at the maid's words, realizing that it will be difficult to save the man. The figure of the maid Emily appears between the castle towers. The girl, seeing her friend, shouts at her why it took her so long to get to their meeting place. However, Aisha comes out from around the corner not alone, but together with her Highness. Emily raises her voice again, asking the maid what the princess is doing here. Aisha says that she brought her. The maid begins to accuse the heroine of the fact that it is because of her that the defender of Adalante is on the verge of death. The princess begins to remember something after hearing the maid call the man. The book said that one of the options for the fall of Adalante is due to the fact that the people lost their protector. The girl understands that she needs to free Lark Nuo right now in order to avoid her death. Ella reminds the maids to hurry if they still want to free the man. Shaking with anger, Emily nevertheless decides to take the mistress to the prisoner and tells him to follow her. The princess passes by the prisoners, wondering how they can live in these terrible conditions. Aisha runs up to Mr. Lark's cell and calls him. Lark Nuo is a former royal general of Adalante. Ella looks at the man's condition and assumes that he was tortured. The maid tells Lark that she asked the princess to have mercy on him. The man's hateful gaze turns to her Highness. Feeling how much the prisoner despises the girl makes her shudder. Closing his eyes, Lark laughs and says that he doesn't need the princess's mercy, so she can leave. Ella annoyedly replies that she is helping from the bottom of her heart, to which the man reminds him that he is here because of the cowardice of one of his subordinates. In her thoughts, the girl is again angry with the princess for the reason for the imprisonment of the former royal general. The maids turn their heads towards the princess, looking at her with hatred. Ella loudly asks the man to stop being poor and says to quickly leave here with them. At this noise, the elder brother and his servant come. The princess looks at the prince irritably and reflects that since he came here in person, the matter is now becoming more complicated. They start to take Lark away, but the girl stops him, saying that it was she who imprisoned the man and that she is in charge of his life. The brother mockingly looks at his sister, saying that now she has decided to free the one who has been sentenced to death. Tyler comes closer to the princess and says that such behavior is not her style. Ella looks away and realizes that she has really stepped out of character, but realizing that she is still in the body of the princess and retorts to the prince that this does not concern him, demanding that his man move away. Tyler tries to put pressure on Ella with his menacing gaze. The elder brother tells his sister to continue working on her theater. The servant hands him a scroll. The man unfolds it and reads that by decree of the king, Lark Nuo is sentenced to hanging today. Her Highness looks with hatred at Thaler, who orders the criminal to be taken away. Finally, the princess turns to the prisoner and barely audibly tells him to wait. Lark notices this and manages to read the girl's words on her lips. Ella still decides to check what is written in the decree, but her brother raises it above her head so that her sister doesn't get it. Waving the paper, the brother leaves, saying that it was all thanks to her. The princess wonders why her brother said that. Ella speculates that a faction of the aristocracy was behind everything originally, and Lark directly reports to the king and protects him. However, with so much information, her head begins to boil. Tyler instructs his servant to follow the princess and see if she has gone to meet someone. At this time, the heroine instructs Emily to go back and find an invitation to dinner, and Aisha follows her. At Sawil's residence, A man is sitting in the garden drinking tea when a servant approaches him, saying that he has guests. A princess came to the sage with a request to discuss one thing. The man looks at the girl and sees that she is covered in sweat. Smiling politely, the man says that it is still early, so he offers to drink a cup of tea. Ella asks the sage to listen to her proposal and says that she is ready to give 30% of the theater's proceeds. Smiling sweetly, the man continues to look at the princess. However, the next moment there is no trace of the smile left, as Alan turns a suspicious glance at the maids. The sage turns away from the princess, walking towards the sofa. The ash-haired man sits on it, spreading his legs wide. The man opens his eyes and, looking at the princess, says without emotion that he is not interested in her proposal. The princess begins to convince Alan, saying that Lark Nuo has a good reputation, and this will raise the authority of the sage. But the man asks why he needs this if he is already quite influential. In addition, Alan says that since the prisoner has a crime against the crown, it will be disadvantageous for him. The man starts to leave because he doesn't want to talk to the princess about the other guy, because she might turn to the king. The girl asks, since when is a king more reliable than a sage? Realizing what the heroine just said, she closes her mouth. The guy grins at the girl's words. Alan turns his head and asks if the princess really thinks so. Ella cautiously responds positively to the man, pressing her hands to her chest. The sage tenderly takes a strand of the princess's hair in his hands, saying that the price for salvation is quite high. Directing his gaze to the girl, he asks her if she is really ready to pay. Realizing that she has no choice, Her Highness smiles brightly, asking what the sage desires. Ella approaches the man's face, clarifying whether he wants money or a specific person. Alan smiles a serpentine smile at the princess's straightforwardness and asks what she can offer him. The main character gently touches the character's lower lip. Then the girl removes her hand from the sage's palm. Ella touches Alan's cheek gently. Bringing her fingers to the man's chin, Her Highness approaches his face, and he widens his eyes in surprise. Alan abruptly moves away from the princess, frightened by such close contact. The girl laughs softly at the man's actions, saying that he refuses to take it even when she offers. Mr. Sage chuckles and says that the princess has again exceeded all his expectations. Simply spreading her arms to the sides, Ella says that she shouldn't fall for the same trick twice. The man sits down and offers to discuss what he can still get in return. There are 40 minutes left before Lark Nuo's execution. He stands on the scaffold, covered in blood and wounded. The man remembers the words of the princess, who asked him to wait. However, the criminal's gaze dims, and he begins to lose hope for the best. Ella frowns and tells the sage that many people guess about their cooperation, and he helps her because he needs her. The girl says that the people love Lark, and therefore his execution could affect her already bad reputation. The sage says that the status of a princess is useful to him, but he will stop cooperation if she constantly causes problems. Ella proudly tells him that she is smart and has a voice before the king. Alan laughs at the heroine's reaction, saying that the princess shouldn't be so boastful. The princess says that only she is suitable for the role of a puppet, since the other brothers do not have the strong authority of their father. The masked man smirks at Ella's words and calls his servant, Felix, to pour the wine. The sage says that he is hurt by the heroine's conversations and great efforts for the sake of another man. Clearing his throat, the man gives instructions to Felix. The servant places a document with a red cover in front of the princess. When the heroine opens it, she sees the word contract and many of its clauses. The girl understands that the sage has deceived her again. Ella turns her gaze to the satisfied man in the mask, who has calculated everything in advance, even preparing the documents. The princess begins to read the document. It says that she must obey the orders of the sage, do everything with his approval. While drinking wine, the man points out that the most important thing is on the last line. Seeing that the last line states that she must appear at the first call, the girl shouts that he is taking advantage of the opportunity. Alan interrupts her and says that she can take her time to think about everything, since the execution site is 25 minutes away. Ella drinks all the wine to the bottom in one go and tells him to give her the pen. The sage smiles triumphantly at the princess's decision. The heroine, with irritation in her voice, tells Alan to go to the execution site while she returns to the palace to find the king. The first prince sits in front of the scaffold, and says that the time has come to hang the criminal. A noose is placed around the bloodied man's neck. The servant is about to turn the lever to the other side to hang Lark Nuo, but someone shouts at them to stop. A crowd of people riding a horse appears from around the corner. Concerned, Tyler screams to pull the lever faster. The servant unquestioningly carries out the prince's order, clicking his handle. The rope flies up, squeezing the former royal general's throat. The sage hurriedly passes by the princess's elder brother. The man simultaneously takes out a sword to throw it towards the prisoner. The blade hits the target and Lark Nuo falls hard to the ground. The horse slows down next to a man whose life a few seconds ago was in the balance. Lark looks at the sage in surprise, not understanding why he is helping him. Alan turns to the first prince, saying that he treats him without respect and judges him without reason. Looking contemptuously at Mo Tyler, he asks him if he understands what problems he now has because of such behavior. Tyler opens his mouth to answer the ashen-haired man's accusations. However, the sage, not interested in the man's justifications, turns away from him. Alan raises his hand and, as an emperor, announces that the execution is cancelled and the case of the accused will be reconsidered. The sage orders the man to be taken back, but the first prince protests indignantly and demands to see the king's order. Ashhair yells at the man that he forgot his place. Enveloping everything around with his serpentine aura, the sage says that even the church cannot challenge his decision. Alan looks askance at the criminal, who is still sitting on the ground, still not realizing that he survived. The sage once again repeats his order to be taken back to prison until a new verdict is announced. Ella stands in her father's office, asking him why he can't give her the prisoner. The king tells her that he has already issued a decree on his hanging, and there is no reason to change it, to which Ella is indignant. His Majesty gets angry and says that Ella has become too capricious lately, although she wasn't so annoying before. The actress has tears in her eyes. She says that she did not do all this for herself. Since the father does not want to help the princess, she decides to demonstratively run away from the office. Waving her hand, she silently begs for the king to stop her. The heroine's guess is confirmed, and her father grabs her hand, telling her to say what she wanted. The princess looks at the king with puppy dog eyes and says that the abolition of the execution is needed specifically for him. Ella says that at first she was offended, so she arrested Lark, but then she thought that her father's rating might fall. The king doubts, because it is not good to go back on your words, but his daughter tells him that no one will think so. The man agrees, but says that everything needs to be checked again for a final decision. The girl is very happy with her father's decision, saying that she loves him very much. The man innocently exhales at the reaction of his daughter, who left the office. The princess happily runs to Aisha to please her with the news that her idol has been pardoned. However, instead of joy, only fear is reflected on the maid's face. She tells the heroine that Mr. Lark Nuo is being tortured. The man is in a poorly consecrated place. Tied with his hands up, the servants brutally beat him. The criminal looks angrily and provokes them to hit him harder. For the words of the former royal general, he gets a whip in the face. The servants laugh and discuss that the princess deliberately appointed a more painful death instead of hanging. The prisoner's gaze begins to dim at the words of the guards, gradually losing hope. However, at the same moment, Her Highness comes into the torture room, plunging everyone into shock. The fire of hope lights up again in the commander's eyes at the sight of the girl. A red-haired servant runs up to Ella and says that they are interrogating a criminal within the framework of the law. The heroine looks at them menacingly, saying that she is their law. Pointing to Lark, the princess says that she will send everyone to the gallows if blood spills from the commander's beautiful body again. The words of Her Highness make the prisoner feel uneasy. Ella blushes at her own words and points out that she meant strength, not beauty, because if he dies, who will defend the kingdom? The princess reports that the king has transferred the Lark Nuo case under her responsibility, to which the servant says that it is still under review. The heroine points to herself, asking the redhead if he thinks she's lying. Very angry, Ella begins to approach him, threatening to punish him for slander. However, the girl is gently stopped by a stranger's hand on her shoulder. Sawile tells the princess that he will be upset if she gets her hands dirty on these people. Her Highness throws off the sage's hand, telling him to talk to the men himself. Suddenly the girl is pierced by the aura of the ash-haired man, and it begins to seem to her that she has already experienced something similar before. Ella pushes these thoughts away from herself, realizing that now there is no time to think about it. The heroine takes the decree from Felix's hands and shows it to the servants, saying that she is in charge of Lark Nuo's business. The guards, with their heads drooping, leave, recognizing the princess's victory. Her Highness tells the men to tell her brother that if he continues to interfere with her, he will greatly regret it. The girl turns towards Adalante's defender and sees him begin to fall to the ground. Realizing that Lark is about to hit the ground hard, the heroine screams helplessly. At this moment, Vale pushes the criminal onto Felix, saving him from falling. Ella scolds the sage for this method of help, to which he replies that he was simply saving her reputation. The hero's conversation is interrupted by a wounded criminal. Lark asks Her Highness the reason she decided to release him. The princess smiles, saying that the man's death will be a great loss for Adalante. The girl says that she has changed her mind about the criminal and is ready to fulfill any demand as compensation. Ella claims that even if Lark Nuo wants to return to the Horse Guards, there will be no problem with that. The man is already opening his mouth to give his answer to the heroine's proposal, but the sage hits him. The princess screams loudly and indignantly at such actions of the ash-haired man. The sage orders Felix to take the criminal to Her Highness's theater. The man turns to the girl, telling her not to worry about Lark and to focus on spending time with him. Vale grabs the princess by the hand, saying that Wow Uden is almost ready, to which she tells him that she had no such plans. The sage turns a sly look at Ella and pronounces the word contract syllable by syllable. The girl resigns herself to her fate and asks to at least let go of her hand, to which she is refused. Lark Nuo hardly opens his eyes and sees in front of him the maids who asked for mercy on him. Feeling heaviness throughout his body, the man takes a sitting position on the bed and thanks the servants for their help. Defender Adalante asks if the girls are servants in the palace, to which he hears that they serve the princess. Lark is very surprised by Emily's words and asks how much his pardon cost her. Aisha tells Mr. Nuo that he can just talk to the princess. The girl says that earlier she also considered Her Highness cruel and evil, but she agreed with the king and the sage to pardon the criminal. Lark reflects on His Majesty's continued neutrality as the two factions fight. Ella enters the room, asking if the former royal general Adalante has woken up yet. Seeing that the man is awake, the heroine tells him that he can go to his house whenever he wishes. Lark frowns and asks in a loud voice if the princess wants him to leave. Her Highness looks at the hero in bewilderment, not understanding why he is not happy about this news. Ella warns Mr. Nuo that she had to work hard to save him. The heroine looks at the man menacingly, angry that she made so much effort for him. Lark, still not believing, asks the girl if she is letting him go just like that, without asking for anything in return. The former general begins to list what he can do for the princess and who he can become, but Ella stops him. The girl does not have time to say anything as someone hastily enters the room. The theater workers excitedly ask to listen to them and apologize for such a sudden visit. Faya reports that the pub, which recently opened, is taking their customers and completely copying everything they do in the theater, including hiring dancers. The girl gloomily says that these dancers are forced to drink alcohol with the guests, and if necessary, she is also ready to do this. The princess hits Faya on the head, angry at what was said. Ella warns that the purple-haired girl should never dare to stoop to such a level even in her thoughts. After this, the princess pats the girl on the head, saying that she is not bothered by such dirty methods of that beer shop. Her Highness turns to Jack and asks him if he has prepared the tablet as she asked. The young man holds it out, and the princess rejoices at the quality of the work done. Ella says that tomorrow the theater is finally opening after renovation, so they need to put a notice on the gate and hand out flyers. The theater workers are filled with happiness and shout joyfully at the words of their mistress. The princess turns to Lark Nuo, asking if he believes that serving her will keep him safe. Ella smiles sweetly and holds out her palm, asking, in this case, to pay for medicine and accommodation for the days that he spent unconscious. Aisha uneasily says that she is ready to return all the money spent on the former general. The heroine asks the girl to calm down, because a man should not allow women to support him. Lark clutches the sheet, realizing that the princess saved him for another purpose. Defender Adalante asks Her Highness what she wants from him, already preparing for the fact that he will be ordered to kill someone. Ella good-naturedly points to the children, asking Lark to accompany them and help hand out flyers. The man is shocked by the princess's words. First, Prince Adalante sits on the sofa and enjoys the company of spectacular and beautiful girls. The man, who is also enjoying the girl, asks Tyler if he has heard about the theater opening soon. The prince frowns and is clearly not happy about this news, because his sister has not learned her lesson. Ella's older brother returns to the girls, who are standing aside, and says that he wants to try the blonde first, and then the others. On the streets of the city, Jack and the rest of the children address passers-by, inviting them to a new event, Create Your Own Idol. One of the interested people asks to give him a leaflet, but immediately flinches when he notices someone behind Jack's back. The man gets scared and runs away, shouting that he doesn't need any leaflet. The theater director sighs in disappointment, understanding the reason for that person's behavior. Jack turns to Lark Nuo, saying that they are pouring wine nearby and offers to sit there until they finish. With his arms crossed over his chest, Adelante's protector refuses the offer, saying that he promised the princess he would protect them. Jack tells Lark that because of him, people are afraid to take leaflets, so they can carry it until the night. Mr. Nuo asks the blonde man if all the theater workers are former slaves and why they support the royal family. The theater director confidently states that he supports Ella because she is not like other royals. Jack says that the girl gave them not only freedom, but also hope. The young man smiles, saying that under the current rulers, one cannot expect the abolition of slavery. But if a princess becomes the ruler, then a miracle can happen. Lark asks the blonde if he thinks that Her Highness started playing games just to gain their support. Jack says in a loud tone that their few measly lives are not worth such a big deception. The director states that even if the theater is not something serious, it is definitely part of something larger. The young man steps away from the man, telling the children that they will distribute leaflets elsewhere. Blonde warns Mr. Nuo that they will go to the last planned distribution location. Lark watches the departing children warily. The man remembers how, before leaving, he found the princess very quietly saying something to Jack. The defender wonders if Her Highness is now the one who took advantage of people and spread rumors. At the same time, the heroine is walking quickly down the street, trying to break away from the sage. Savale asks Ella why she looks so unhappy, because he is following the agreement. The princess indignantly shouts at him that all this is because he deceived her. The girl says that they accidentally bumped into each other, and Vale suddenly invited her, and according to the contract, she cannot refuse this. The heroine asks the sage, who generally writes in the invitations, "Where you go, so will I." The man chuckles at the princess's reaction and confidently declares that it is he who writes this. Ella realizes that she cannot stop the sage from following her on her heels, but asks not to ruin her plans if it is not a matter of life and death. Vale becomes even more interested in where the girl is going after all. The princess smiles mysteriously and says that she is going to castrate the libertines. The heroine approaches the room in which the first prince is having fun, but one of the servants stops her, asking to see the invitation. Ella covers half her face with a fan and asks the servant if she needs it. The man does not recognize the princess in the heroine and says that if she joins them, she will not need an invitation. Her Highness shouts at the servant not to disturb her and hits him on the leg with her heel. Ella tells the man that she has come to settle an old score. The heroine enters the room and sees in front of her a place that looks like a real brothel. Mo Tyler asks his sister where her manners went. The princess asks her brother exactly the same question, since earlier the prince managed to interfere with the work of her theater and use her name to accuse Lark Nuo. The man retorts to the girl that he learned all this from her. Ella shouts that the prince should not compare her with himself and asks to end this war. The heroine offers a deal. Whoever has the most profit in a month wins, and the loser closes his establishment and does not create problems for his opponent. Tyler replies that he doesn't have time for children's games and asks not to bother him anymore. Expecting such a reaction, Ella grins mysteriously. The princess heads to the exit of the room, simultaneously warning her brother that she gave him a chance. The prince raises his hand, ordering the carriage to be prepared since he needs to go to the shrine. The man smiles, anticipating how he will expose his sister to clean water. Ella goes outside and notices a sage standing nearby. The girl asks Sabotage if he is a wizard because he constantly appears out of nowhere and also disappears. The man approaches the heroine and asks her if her offense lies in the fact that he did not go with her to support her. Vale barely audibly asks the princess why she doubts his sincerity. However, Her Highness does not hear this, so the man asks her louder about the further plan of action. Ella smiles insidiously and asks the sage if he knows what the casino owners are most afraid of. The girl begins to smile even more, saying that the answer is the influx of crowds. A few days later, the heroine stands contentedly in His Majesty's office and watches him shout at the first prince. The king throws a book at his son, saying that he expected some great success from him after Ella's criticism. Tyler hastily opens the document, which contains many negative reviews about the place he visited. The first prince shouts that this is slander because the task of his hotel is to entertain aristocrats. The man turns to his sister, saying that the other visitors were slaves who, on the contrary, should be proudly served by the nobility. Ella turns her gaze to the king and sees only his angry and concentrated degeneration of his face. The princess understands that things are bad, since the brothel turned out to be a legal place, but she has a backup plan. The heroine loudly asks whether it is normal to force civilian women to do such work. Her Highness turns to her father, saying that now the girls are afraid to leave their homes, fearing that they will be kidnapped. Tyler yells at his sister to shut up and hand the case over to someone who can handle it. The king interrupts his children's conversations and asks Kaliam to take care of this matter. Smiling contentedly, the third prince gets down on one knee, accepting his father's order. Hearing Tyler begin to resent his father's actions, the king covers his face with his hand, telling everyone to leave. Ella grins and tells her brother that he got himself into trouble. After the audience, the first prince turns to someone asking him to report everything to the master. Tyler smirks that his sister wasn't so stupid. All the theater workers gathered at the Colosseum to celebrate the high income and the large number of their visitors. After the celebration, the princess says goodbye to Jack and Faye. A girl walks down a dark street and shouts loudly that this day is simply wonderful. Back at the palace, the blonde maid runs up to Her Highness and asks why she drank so much. The heroine does not pay attention to the servant's words and reaches out to the girl's cheeks, starting to pinch them. Ella is approached by Lark, who towers menacingly over her and apologizes for taking her away from such an important matter. The princess is frightened by the sudden appearance of Adalante's defender, so she hastily retreats back. The man asks Her Highness in a serious tone if it is true that Mo Tyler was the one who wanted to kill him. Ella whispers to the maid, asking her when Lark arrived and why she wasn't told about it. The princess then awkwardly tells the man that it's late, so they can talk about everything tomorrow. Mr. Nuo grins and tells the main character that if she doesn't want to tell him the truth, then he will ask her brother directly. Hearing this, Ella stops him by grabbing his hand. The girl realizes with horror that Lark is not coming to talk to Tyler, but to take revenge. If the former general went to the first prince now, he would destroy everything for which the princess made great efforts. Ella asks the man to cool down because Mo Tyler's security is just standing there and watching. Lark Nuo suddenly becomes embarrassed, realizing that Her Highness has been touching his hand for too long. Defender Adalante tries to free himself from Ella's grip while she yells at him not to act on emotions. The heroine tells the man that she also wants to take revenge on her brother, so she offers to unite. Without turning his head, Lark asks Her Highness if he can say something. The girl smiles friendly and answers his question positively. Mr. Nuo warns the heroine that even if a man and a woman are reaching for the same object, their hands should not touch. After his words, Ella immediately lets go of the former general's hand and asks what he thinks about her proposal. Lark carefully touches the pads of his fingers to the hand that the princess recently held. Defender Adalante agrees to cooperate with Her Highness, but asks her to explain why she is opposing her brother. Ella realizes that she cannot tell the truth. Why one of the reasons for the death of the state is the man behind the first prince. The princess says that she now has no opportunity to prove her sincerity, so she asks to gain her trust. The man decides to watch the heroine, and if he realizes that she is not going to act, he will take revenge in his own way. Ella asks Lark how he is going to watch her and how he could end up in the palace. The girl does not receive any answers, as the former general silently leaves the room. The next day, King Adalante asks Lark Nuo if he is sure of his decision not to return to the royal guard. To this, Adalante's defender replies that he acts consciously. However, the man tells His Majesty that he has one more request: to become Princess Ella's guardian knight. The heroine is very surprised by the words of Lark Nuo, since the guardian knight protects from all kinds of dangers and serves only one person. Savail looks at the man with contempt, as this position allows a man to enter the girl's bedroom at any time. After some time, Ella walks through the palace grounds, but there is no hint of a good mood on her face. The girl turns to someone and yells at him not to follow her around. Lark confidently replies that since he has already taken an oath, he will soon be responsible for the safety of Her Highness. The princess says that since the man does not want to serve her father, she will assign him to the theater as a security captain. Mr. Nuo remains as unshakable and convinced that he must protect Ella. Seeing that Lark is not going to listen to her, the heroine resigns herself and tells him to do as he wants. The girl finally looks the guardian knight straight in the eye and notices something. The defender of Adalante looks intently at the princess. The heroine finds such a look strange. The man asks Ella's opinion that a person's feelings for another can change dramatically. Her Highness looks away and awkwardly asks not to change the topic of conversation. Having not heard a clear answer, Lark reaches out his hand to the girl's hair and lightly touches the hair. However, his hand is immediately stopped by someone else's. Savail annoyedly tells the man that he has not yet learned the ethics of chivalry. The sage says that he is amazed at how quickly and successfully the princess creates a harem for herself. Lark Nuo removes his hand from his grip and bows before Ella, saying that he will accept any punishment. The girl warns the former general that they will talk later, since the sage clearly came for a reason. Finally, the guardian knight looks at Savail with contempt and then leaves. Ella exhales and thanks the sage for coming on time, since he has no idea where this could have gone. Ash-haired grins and says that he still came at the wrong time. The princess smiles awkwardly and says that there is nothing between her and Lark other than a working relationship. Her Highness clarifies the reason for the sage's arrival and says that she also needs to discuss something related to Lark Nuo. Suddenly, Vale yells at the heroine not to talk about the other man next to him. The sage quickly approaches the princess and asks if she and the former general are the same in her eyes. Ella begins to get angry at the ash-haired man, since he began to cross all boundaries with such behavior. The princess pushes the sage away and shouts that they are the same because they both do and say strange things. The heroine turns away, shouting that if she didn't have to survive, she wouldn't care about anyone. Realizing that the girl is leaving, the man will hug the girl, causing her to lose her balance. Her Highness is angry at such actions, so she intends to slap Vale, but accidentally touches the mask. The mask falls to the ground, and a bleeding wound appears on the sage's face. The heroine's eyes widen in surprise, and she looks at the man in disbelief. The girl faces her only close friend, Alan. Ella looks at the man with despair in her eyes, not understanding what is happening. The heroine thinks that she opened up too much to Alan and behaved completely differently with the sage. All the moments associated with the ash-haired one flash through the princess's head. The heroine experiences a trembling that spreads throughout her body. Alan notices this and tries to take the girl's hand, but she yells at him not to come closer. Smiling friendly, the sage raises his hands and says that there is no need to be afraid of him because they are allies. Ella crosses her arms over her chest, saying that she doesn't understand what the man is talking about. Alan says that he did not want to deceive the princess because he was sure that she recognized him. To confirm his words, the sage puts his hand on his heart and swears to God that he will never betray the heroine. Her Highness examines Savail carefully, noticing every detail in his appearance. The princess looks down and says that she doesn't care about the man's words. The girl tries to leave again, but the sage grabs her hand. Alan tells the heroine that he will win her trust again and asks not to give it to anyone for now. While all the theater actors are preparing for their performance, the princess sits alone and depressed away from everyone. Faya approaches her mistress and asks what she is thinking about. Her Highness sighs and begins to talk about one of her friends. However, Ella does not finish, asking the girl with purple hair to return to the stage. The heroine throws her head up, thinking that she definitely won't fall for the loud promises made by Savail. Now the girl's puzzle is coming together, because the sage and Alan were similar in appearance, but differed in character. Ella's eyes fill with disappointment at the thought that the ash-haired man wanted to get close to her in order to kill her. The princess slaps herself on the cheeks, driving away dark thoughts, because the future, like their relationship, could change. Her Highness replays in her head the man's words about how he will win her trust again. The heroine begins to hit herself even harder on the cheeks, trying to convince herself that appearances can be deceiving. A maid approaches the girl, asking if the princess is feeling well. Ella smiles friendly, saying that she was just fighting off insects. The maid reports that His Majesty has ordered Her Highness to return to the palace to discuss something related to the International Congress. The heroine enters the office where the royal family, a sage and a man in a robe, have gathered. Ella notices that the atmosphere in the room is saturated with gloom and tension. The messenger of God, Tariq, looks at the princess carefully and smiles. Her Highness notices that the man is wearing a white robe, which means he is a cleric. Next, the heroine's gaze turns to the sage, who smiles sweetly at her. Ella turns her head away from Alan because she thinks that he knew something about this meeting, but did not tell her anything. His Majesty informs everyone that in half a month their country will host the World Congress, so he wants to hear some proposals on this matter. However, there is still dead silence in the office. Then the king decides to find out the opinion of the sage, to which he simply asks to give him some assignment. The commander of the knightly detachment, Corporal Lars, also asks His Majesty to give him some task. Hiram Adalante rubs the bridge of his nose, disappointed by the men's answers. The king asks the divine messenger if he has any suggestions. Tariq replies that he listened to the Enlightenment priest and believes that the princes will be able to complete the matter. At this moment, Tyler tells His Majesty that the third prince will definitely be able to cope with this difficult task. Liam reproaches his brother for lying, but the first prince claims that state affairs are no joke, so he will do a better job with this matter. Happy Liam stands up and asks the king to grant him this task, and the envoy confirms that the Holy See will cooperate with the third prince. The Congress held once in a decade is the best platform to demonstrate the strength of a nation. Ella asks Larknuo how a country can demonstrate its power. The Guardian Knight replies that the aspects of the demonstration are chosen by the host country, and each other will bring its capable people to the conference. The princess understands that the host country has the advantage of lengthy preparation, but this time their country was chosen only half a month before the event. The girl thinks that her older brother is plotting again. Even the Holy Throne intervened, so the assembly this time will not be simple. In the book that the heroine read in her world, there was no record of the General Congress, so too much could change due to her intervention. Lark notices the confusion on Ella's face, so he extends his hand to her to reassure her. The silence is interrupted by the sage, who silently entered the room and carefully observed Mr. Nuo's behavior. The man mockingly asks the heroes if he interfered with them. The princess asks the ash-haired man for what purpose he came, to which Alan replies that he came to dispel the girl's doubts. The sage approaches the heroine and says that he has good news. Savale approaches the princess's face and congratulates her on getting married. At the same time, a dark-skinned man is riding in the desert, looking forward to meeting his beautiful bride. Ella yells at Alan to stop making jokes like that. The man takes out a black envelope, saying that the preparations were carried out in secret and everything has already been decided. Her Highness tries to take the envelope from the sage, but he does not allow this, taking the envelope to the side. The heroine is angry at Alan's action and rises from her seat to snatch the letter. The ash-haired man grins and puts his arm around the girl's waist. Ella is not surprised by this action of Savale and breaks into a sly smile. A clicking sound is heard in the room. Larknuo immediately takes the black envelope from the sage's fingers. The heroine grins, playfully telling Alan that her assistants were behind him all this time. The man approaches the girl's ear and whispers to her that he never thought that she would be in his arms. Finally, Ella's mind clears and she pushes the sage away from her. The princess's face turns red from the realization that the beauty of the ash-haired man has clouded her consciousness. The heroine extends her hand to Lark, ordering him to give her a secret order. The order states that it is now necessary to form an alliance with the state of Scipia in order to stop possible hostility on their part. Ella crumples the paper out of anger, realizing that in politics there is no peace or friendship because there is only profit. Alan says he has more news, but this time it's bad. Seeing that the good news for the sage is heavy artillery, the heroine hopefully asks what the bad news is, hoping that it will calm her down. Vale informs the girl that she needs to meet with the Prince of Sepia, and if nothing happened, then the messengers are already at the gate. Ella puts on a straight face, realizing that this is really bad news. One of the attendants asks His Highness if he needs to change before going down. Hiding behind snow-white tulle, the man replies that this is not necessary. The prince threateningly asks the messenger if he dares to order him, after which the servant falls to his knees, asking for mercy. The next moment, the resident of Sepia falls to the ground dead. People watching this scene are amazed at how the prince of another state decided to demonstrate his power. The nobility discusses the fact that previously similar scenes could be observed among them, but at some point this stopped. Hearing such conversations, the heroine begins to get angry. The ambassador announces that His Highness, the third prince of the kingdom of Sepia, has arrived. People call the ambassador arrogant, to which he asks them if they are unhappy with something. There's a cry from the princess's carriage that she is really not happy with something. Ella comes down the steps and says that she is very unhappy with such a groom. The heroine looks mockingly at the man, telling him to go back where they came from. The third prince of Sepia passes his greedy gaze over the girl. After her words, the princess quickly returns to her carriage. Lark pulls the reins towards himself, forcing the horses to move quickly. The prince is not far behind and forces his elephant to follow Ella's carriage. However, such actions are stopped by the knights of Adalante, surrounding the man from all sides. The sage asks His Highness Tariq to follow him into the city if he does not intend to leave the palace grounds. Alan warns the man that he will need to put in some effort to obtain the promised treasure. Seeing that the Adalante knights are not going to let him pass further, Tariq orders his animal to step into the city. The sage returns to his residence, hurriedly heading somewhere. Ella asks Savoil if everything has been resolved, and when she receives a positive answer, she calls the maid to her. Realizing why the princess called her, the man gestures for the maid not to do anything. Ash-haired approaches the heroine and begins to remove heavy jewelry from her. The girl says that she is lucky that such a smart man serves her. Ella argues that the prince of the Sepia state is quite cruel. The sage says that His Highness is not as stupid as he seems. The princess thinks that since it was her older brother who insisted that she get married, then she is interfering with him. The heroine throws her head up and reminds the sage that he is helping her with this marriage, and she is helping Ka Liam with the Congress. Alan says that everything is going according to plan, and he would not have allowed the wedding to happen anyway, even if Ella herself wanted it. The people gathered in front of the Colosseum with excitement are discussing today's premiere, which is about to take place. Suddenly, an elephant appears in front of the people, roaring at them. However, the townspeople do not pay much attention to the animal and continue to discuss the theatrical performance. Tariq asks his elephant Ponpon why the people are not running away from them. Then the prince decides to show how ruthless he is and gives the command to the elephant to attack. When an animal swings its trunk at people, it encounters an obstacle in the form of a shield in front of it. It was the Knights of Adalante who once again stopped His Highness's attack. Corporal Lars warns Prince Tariq that although he is an honored guest in their country, he has no right to take the lives of the people of Adalante. The man shouts to the commander of the knightly detachment that they do not dare attack Ponpon. The prince's attention turns to the blonde young man who calls His Highness. Jack tells Tariq that the princess has prepared a place of honor for him and is awaiting his arrival. Earlier, the prince's suitor told the man about the success of the theater and about the tickets that allow him to shake hands with his idol. Tariq was then surprised that such tickets cost a lot of money and asked the servant why not buy the girls as mistresses. The respondent responded that the workers carefully follow the theater rules of not having personal contact with fans. The third prince knows that sometimes the princess herself participates in performances, so he joyfully shouts that he is ready to meet his bride. Tariq gets off his vehicle and walks towards the theater entrance, thinking that he underestimated Ella. Behind him, the man hears theater-goers discussing how their beautiful princess is forced to marry such a cruel man. A girl of charming beauty appears on the stage. She moves gracefully and gracefully, attracting all eyes. His Highness Tariq also looks at his bride in fascination throughout the performance. After a while, the heroine is already sitting in her dressing room, taking off her jewelry, and suddenly Prince Sepia begins to break into the room. Her Highness's maid tried to stop Tariq, but the man didn't care about her words. Ella asks the groom if there is any etiquette in his country according to which it is customary to break into a woman's room. The prince begins to approach the girl, asking her if she is still angry. However, a guardian knight appears on Tariq's path and does not intend to let the man get any closer than he needs. His Highness is annoyed by Lark Nuo's actions and angrily shouts at him to move away. Ella tells her fiancé in a raised voice that he crossed the line when he tried to beat up her friends outside her house. Tariq peeks out from behind the former general and happily asks if the bride wants to talk to him. The heroine gives a sign to Lark and warns the prince that she does not agree with their engagement, so he can leave. Tariq grins, looking at the knight who let him through, and says that the marriage does not depend on Ella. The princess answers the groom that since this is so, he can marry her without her consent. The third prince tells the girl that before meeting her, he had bad intentions towards her, but now he will treat her as his wife. The man runs his hand over the heroine's cheek, saying that political marriage is her destiny. The girl's gaze dims when Tariq says that she should be glad that she at least has a beautiful face. His Highness warns that the marriage decision will not change, but he would prefer that Ella marry him of her own free will. Seeing that the princess became sad because of his words, the man grins and hugs her. However, her Highness pushes the groom's hand away, telling him to stop. Ella says that the prince is right, but she wants to make sure he is sincere, otherwise he will only get a cold corpse. Prince Sipi asks the bride to tell her in more detail, but he himself thinks that the girl is naive and a spoiled dummy. The heroine says that she has 3 conditions. The first is not to disturb the order in the city during the Congress. The second is that her groom must become the absolute champion during the convention. And the very last condition is that the man must tell who planned this marriage. When the prince finally leaves, Ella exhales, saying that just a little more, and she would not have been able to hold back. The sage enters the room through the window, saying that the girl looks like she handled everything with ease. Alan takes a snow-white handkerchief from his pocket and begins to wipe the princess's shoulder. From the memory that Tariq touched the girl, the ash-haired man begins to irritably wipe the heroine's entire body. Ella pushes the sage's hand away, asking what he's doing now. The man's face is becoming darker and darker with each passing second. Noticing this, the princess anxiously asks Sawile if everything is okay with him. The man barely audibly says that he is very sorry. The sage still says something barely audible, but Ella doesn't hear any of it and asks to be a little louder. Sawile angrily says that the girl threw herself into the arms of the third prince and did not take her eyes off him, which was untidy to watch. The heroine incomprehensibly says that Alan himself mentioned a trap where she was used as bait. The sage loudly says that the first part of the plan is completed, and now Ella needs to stay away from Tariq. Now the girl is the key to finding evidence of betrayal by the people behind Prince Sepia. Sawile says in a serious tone that the marriage contract must be validly terminated. The heroine chuckles evilly, saying to leave it to her. The princess confidently says that she will not allow her fiancé to win any competition. After some time, all the participants of the Congress had already gathered in the temple of the deity. The corporal approaches His Majesty and reports that all representatives, with the exception of the Luang state, have arrived. Tariq is heard shouting, who irritably asks the king how long they still have to wait to start. Considering such a tone to be beyond the bounds of decency, Hiram Adalante intends to stop it. However, the third Prince of Sepia and his ambassadors stare at the man menacingly, awaiting his next actions. The king shudders and remains silent, unable to say anything else due to fear. Hiram orders the commander of the knightly detachment to begin. The host of the event thanks everyone for visiting and reminds them that the Congress is a testament to the friendship of the allies. The sage rises from his seat, saying that he will begin to kickstart the discussion. 12 girls with musical instruments begin to climb the stairs. Vale asks the convention participants to name them correctly, and the one with the most correct answers wins. All the assembled spectators begin to excitedly discuss the first test for the participants. The sage quietly gives Ella a thumbs up, approving her idea. Tariq orders the servant to go to the Lopu state delegation and convey that he must definitely win. Prince Sipi notices that these instruments are from that mysterious eastern country. The heroine looks with suspicion at the strange behavior of her fiancé, not understanding why he looks so self-confident. Most of these tools are nowhere to be found now, and unless there are time travelers on the side, it is impossible to recognize them all. Her Highness looks intently at the Sipi estate answer sheet and notices that they have one more instrument than Lopu. Sipia's envoys ask Ella why she looks so surprised. The princess says that she simply did not expect that everything in Sipia would be so bad, because they only guessed 8 instruments. Tariq says that a victory is a victory, no matter what the result. The heroine asks the groom why he considers himself the winner. The third prince grins, answering that no one else could give the correct answers. Ella smiles, saying that there is always someone better, and His Highness's self-esteem borders on vanity. Tariq quickly gets up from his seat and looks through binoculars at the sheet in the girl's hands. It turns out that the Mianyu state wrote several more instruments than anyone else. Prince Sipi shouts that such a small state cannot know more than Lopu, the country that understands music better than anyone else. However, the heroine notices that His Highness Tariq was able to write one more instrument than Lopu. Realizing that he was caught cheating, Tariq takes his seat, saying that he will definitely win the debate and military competition. Ella congratulates the Mianyu state and asks the winners to propose a second debate task. Representative Mianyu, an expert in mathematics, announces that it will be necessary to give the correct answer to the problem. The cage contains chickens and rabbits. All animals have 35 heads and 94 legs. The question is how many rabbits are in the cage and how many chickens? The math expert says that the first one to give the correct answer wins. Corporal Lars leans over to the princess and asks her if she already knows the answer to the question, since she thinks that she has entered into an alliance with this state. Ella says that it is clear from them that they would not agree to an alliance, so the girls simply sent them a note with answers. The commander of the night squad says that he does not know the answer to this question, so now they are under Mianyu's heel. The princess only directs her sarcastic gaze at the man. The corporal asks in confusion why the girl is looking at him like that. Her Highness says that this is a task for children, and if the commander had not interfered with her, she would have answered long ago. Corporal Lars blushes brightly, saying that he wants to watch the heroine disgrace herself. Ella raises her hand and announces that she has already solved this problem. The princess says that the correct answer is 23 hens and 12 rabbits. Tariq turns his head towards Mianyu's representative, awaiting his verdict. The math expert confirms that the answer given by the princess is correct. The third prince of Sipia throws a glass of wine at Representative Mianyu out of anger. Next, the man turns towards the heroine and says that he does not recognize this victory. Ella stops the groom, telling him to accept his defeat with dignity. Otherwise, she will consider this a challenge to the International Congress. Tariq begins to rebel even more, but Sipia's envoys try to pacify him, reminding him of the importance of the event. The man grins and says that there is no need to question the results of the competition, since Adalante's victory will not affect the outcome. The princess warns that if the prince loses in the martial arts competition, he will have to admit his mistake. At this time, behind Her Highness, the corporal mutters to himself that he will closely monitor the actions of the third prince. The sage and Ella go down the stairs, and Vale asks the girl if she knew that Tariq would deny his defeat. The princess says that at first it seemed to her that everything would end in one competition, but her fiancé is not the kind of person who admits mistakes. Ash-haired asks with interest what the heroine will do with martial arts. Ella is surprised by the man's question, as she thought he knew the right answer. The corporal announces that the winner of the second task is the state of Adalante, and asks who will be first in the wrestling challenge. Tariq shouts that he assumes that the fight will be one-on-one, and then it will be enough to win 2 victories in 3 rounds. The commander of the nightly detachment draws the sage's attention to himself, tearfully asking for help. Ella chuckles, telling the ash-haired man that his cute charge is waiting for help, so Vale had better help him out of trouble. The man gently touches the heroine's nose, saying that he will do so if she wants it. The girl blushes and tuts at Alan, realizing that a fight awaits him. The sage announces that the rule of the arena is a battle of attrition, and the one who lasts the longest wins. Tariq proposes another rule, that the country should be represented on the battlefield by 2 people. Savale easily agrees to Prince Scipia's proposal. His Highness invites the host of the Congress to speak first, to which the sage also agrees. Half an hour later, Tariq enters the arena and orders the participants to quickly leave, as he already wants to have fun. The gate opens and Ella comes out, thereby surprising her fiancé. The man says that he will fight seriously, regardless of gender, but the heroine says that she only came to see Adalante's victory with her own eyes. Finally, the real participants in the battle, who are Savale and Lark Nuo, enter the arena. The Guardian Knight prepares for his first one-on-one battle. The third prince of Scipia looks at the former general, saying that he does not deserve to get his hands dirty on him. Tariq calls to his fighter named Franco, ordering him to earn the victory. Franco looks down at his opponent with wild eyes, surpassing him in size. Ella looks at her knight with worry in her eyes, wondering if he will be okay against such a big opponent. The sage calms the girl, saying that the Adalante warrior will not be defeated by such a weak opponent. Ash-haired sighs, asking the princess to worry about him because he has to fight with this crazy prince. The heroine asks the man in surprise, could he lose? Alan looks pained, saying that he definitely won't lose, but he might end up injured. The girl just chuckles at this, because even if the sage gets hurt, it won't be the end of the world. Savale is surprised that Ella is so confident in him. The heroine smiles widely and says that it is because the man is the great sage Sawil. The princess thinks to herself that according to the book, Alan was a man of enormous strength and won many victories. The sage turns away from the heroine to hide his reddened face and confidently says that he will not let her down. The tip of Lark's sword hits the enemy's mountain of muscles. The man understands that with such a strong shield in the form of the opponent's body, it will not be so easy to win. At the moment, the knight is distracted by the sage and the princess, who stand aside and talk sweetly to each other. Seeing that his opponent is distracted, Franco aims his fist at Lark's head. The angry knight punches his opponent in the stomach, shouting at him not to interfere. Mr. Nuo says that using a sword is difficult, so he will continue to fight with his bare hands to show what real fighting is like. Franco does not listen to the man and swoops down on him, swinging his arms. Lark informs his opponent that a monkey like him can only use brute force. Knight uses a backbar throw, slamming Franco into the ground. This ends the battle with the victory of Lark Nuo. The former general approaches the princess and says that he was glad to carry out Her Highness's order. Ella pats the man on the shoulder and praises him for a great fight. The heroine tells Prince Tariq that she did not expect that his warriors were not even able to fight back. The third prince points to Lark and asks him if he was the one who invaded his borders with his army. The princess begins to worry, since there was no information about the invasion in the book. The sage answers Tariq that those territories were originally a vassal state of Adalante, so the knight only wanted to return the lost land. The prince says that this dispute makes no sense, because the truth is on the side of the winners. Vale takes out his sword and says that he also wants to explain something to His Highness. The man warns his rival that there will be punishment for wanting to get what belongs to others. The opponents cross swords and the battle begins. Lark watches the battle and remembers that rumor has it that the sage is not the simple government servant he may seem. The princess asks her guardian knight if he is injured. After hearing that Nuo is fine, the girl asks his opinion on how soon the wiser will win. The man is amazed that the heroine does not even consider the option of defeating Sawil. Although Ella does not know what level the ash-haired man's skills are, she is sure that he is able to stand up for himself. Lark, seeing Her Highness's confidence, gloomily says that they will soon see the sage's triumph. The heroine screams that she is upset that people shouting about their strength cannot deal with a simple civil servant. Scipia's envoy asks the princess not to interfere in the third prince's fight. Ella cuts the man off with her gaze, reminding him of who he is talking to. The heroine turns away with displeasure, whispering that her statement was not intended specifically for Tariq. The girl calls the maid to her, asking her to tell someone that the time has come to act. The princess looks at Sawil and thinks that now everything depends on him. Prince Scipi displeasedly shouts at the sage that he is acting without initiative, but Vale says that he is serious about winning. His Highness tells the ash-haired man that he succeeded in pissing off Tariq, and he will regret it. The next moment, astonished exclamations from the audience are heard in the arena. Ella asks Lark Nuo what caused people to react like this. The knight replies that Prince Sipi used Shune's technique. While the sage dodges the attacks, the former general says that Tariq used to have a reputation as the god of war Shun. Shune said that he was good with 2 swords, which means that Tariq had fought with only half his strength up to this point. Savale grins and says that his opponent has finally entered into a frenzy, as the god of war expects. The third prince tells the sage not to be distracted and focus on the battle. Ashhair asks the princess how much longer he needs to fight, since he won't last long, to which the princess says that he can call it a day. The sage grins, saying that he will do everything right now. Sensing something was wrong, Tariq jumps away from the man to the side. Vale smiles kindly and says that this task cannot be completed quickly. At this moment, the prince remembers the princess's words that people, shouting their strength, cannot quickly cope with a civil servant. It dawns on His Highness that the girl did not say this to provoke him. Alan points the tip of his sword directly at the prince's eye, and at that moment, Tariq realizes that your words were a signal. The prince dodges the sage's attack. However, the blade still cuts his skin. Savale doesn't stop there and swings his sword again. Tariq manages to dodge again, but takes an unfavorable body position. At the same second, the sage points the tip of his sword at the opponent. Vale smirks and advises the prince to give up. However, the man says that he has not lost yet. The sage slides his sword across his opponent's neck, causing blood to flow. Alan warns the prince that they want to gain victory, not take his life. The princess shouts to Vale that victory is victory, and there is no need to harm His Highness. Otherwise, she will be ashamed of this victory. The heroine turns to the prince, mockingly asking if he is offended because of her success. At these words, the sage unsuccessfully tries to hold back his laughter. Suddenly, a crash is heard. The animal, His Highness, shatters the arena wall, rushing inside. The prince looks at Panpan in shock. Spectators begin to run away from the rental stands in horror. Tariq's servants restrain him so that he does not rush towards his elephant. The rest are trying to stop the angry animal so that no one gets hurt. The princess smiles and turns to her guardian knight. The servants use sticks to calm the elephant. Tariq quickly runs up to Panpan, asking him how he feels and why he suddenly ran out. At this, the elephant raises its trunk and roars at its owner. The servant approaches His Highness and tells him that some insect got into the elephant's trunk and he fell off the chain in pain. Tariq shouts furiously how this could happen and where were the people looking after the animal. The caretakers fall to their knees and say that someone set them up by putting poison in their food, causing them to catch an infection. The prince kicks one of the men, calling him useless. The heroine approaches the groom and says that before punishing the caretakers, he should carefully look at one person. Standing next to the princess is Lark Nuo and one of Prince Sipia's men. Tariq asks the girl how he should understand such actions of Her Highness. Ella unfolds the paper and instead asks the prince to explain why his man is carrying Adalante's defense plans with him. After some time, the heroes gather in the throne room. The corporal informs the king that the defense plans of Adalante, certified by His Majesty, were indeed in the hands of Sipia's man. Chiron asks the third prince what reasonable explanation he can give for such a thing. Tariq just scratches his ear, asking what he has to do with it. The man says that the papers were not found in his hands, and that there is a traitor in the royal family. The prince turns a serious look at the king, asking if they want to set him up. His Highness does not understand how the princess managed to find these documents so quickly. The king decides to check with his daughter what she can say about this. Ella says that first of all, she wants to apologize for planning today's event, but she did not use the documents to frame anyone. The girl says that because of unkind rumors about her fiancé, she asked the elder to find out everything. The heroine says that she never thought that they would discover how someone was secretly contacting Prince Tariq. After these words, the princess directs her gaze to her older brother. Tyler asks the princess what she's getting at, to which the girl asks him why he was so nervous. The king stops his children's bickering by gesturing to stop. Chiron asks his daughter in a serious tone why she didn't immediately report her suspicions. Ella says she had no evidence and was afraid of scaring off the criminals ahead of time. The girl tells her father that the sage also knew about this, so if the king does not believe her, then he asks him to at least believe Sawile. His Majesty is surprised by the girl's words and says that of course he believes the ash-haired man. After this, Chiron looks at his sons with suspicion, wondering who then could have betrayed their plans. Both princes begin to deny, saying that it was definitely not them. Ella asks to look at the man kneeling behind her. Lark squeezes the suspect's face, and the princess asks if it looks familiar. Those in the hall begin to talk about how this man looks like the servant of the first prince, Mo Tyler. His Highness begins to retreat and almost falls, but the hands of the divine messenger catch him. The king narrows his eyes and asks his son how to understand this. Someone's voice tells His Majesty that doubt is the seed of darkness that can defile the soul. Savale looks at the princess, saying that the very person he was talking about has come. Ella sighs in disappointment, because the sage again foresaw everything. The king extends his hand to the newcomer, saying that he did not think that he would still be able to come. A high-ranking official, His Holiness, enters the throne room. The man says that the divine light illuminated Adalante, and he could not miss such a happy day. His Holiness congratulates Her Highness on her wonderful husband and expresses the hope that the sage also congratulated her. The man says that Sawale helped test Prince Tariq to make sure of his intentions. The high-ranking official looks closely at the sage, asking if he is right. Ella looks at the Holy One with the same look, realizing that every word of the high priest is a trap. The princess says that, unfortunately, she cannot accept the congratulations of His Holiness. The man asks in surprise if the heroine's heart is occupied by someone else, and in this case, the king has put her in a difficult position. The girl is amazed that the high priest took her side. After this, Ella realizes that the sage really calculated everything. His Majesty says that his daughter has become close to Sawale recently. The princess puts on a smile and says that this is true. His Holiness tells the king that his children have the right to have close relationships with the courtiers, because this may be useful to them in the future as rulers. Chiron smiles, saying that running the country is his burden, so let the children live without it for now. The man opens his arms for a hug, saying that he is ready to do anything for the happiness of his daughter. The king happily reports that he spent his entire treasury preparing Ella's dowry, so he hopes that Tariq will take good care of her. The princess shouts at her father indignantly, saying that she has won. His Majesty interrupts his daughter, saying that they can celebrate the heroine's victory and wedding at the same time. The heroine turns around and tells her father that she hates him most of all. Chiron turns to Tariq, saying that he has spoiled Ella too much, so the groom will have to be patient. The third prince bows to the king, thanking him for his trust. His Majesty decides to decide on the wedding date, and His Holiness proposes the celebration of the divine descent in 3 days. The sage smiles politely and asks to entrust the organization of the holiday to him, promising to arrange an ideal wedding. Chiron looks at Sawale carefully and then says that he will leave it to him. In the evening, on the streets of the city, the residents of Adalante joyfully celebrate the festival of the divine descent. However, the heroine sits alone by the fountain with a glass of wine. Alan approaches the girl, asking what she is thinking about, to which Ella says that the speeches of some men can deceive the devil himself. The sage tells the princess that this sounds too vague, so she explains that she means him. The man says that Her Highness offended him because he never lied to her. Ella agrees that Vale is indeed telling the truth, because he calculated every step, and in the end, everyone will become his pawns. The sage learned that Tyler and Tariq's deal would take place during the convention, because the only option for a safe meeting was the day when everyone got together. Alan reminds the princess that it was her idea to provoke the elephant so that their contact would give himself away. Ella recalls that Say Vale expected the high priest to come to Tyler's defense and facilitate her marriage. Ashhair says that he just wanted to see if the first prince had enough weight in the eyes of the Holy One. If Mo Tyler had not been so important, the high priest would not have appeared. And then the prince would have left the scene, and the girl would have broken off the engagement. Realizing that the man again had a hidden plan that she did not know about, the heroine drinks all the wine in one gulp. The princess gets up from her seat, announcing that she will go look for Tariq. The ash-haired man clenches his fist tightly, trying to stop himself from going after the girl. Felix approaches the sage and worriedly asks if his master wants to tell Ella the real reason. Looking after the heroine, the man says that it will be better if she is in the dark. Finally, the day came when the wedding preparations were completed, and the bride and groom became husband and wife. After the ceremony, the king sees off his daughter, who is leaving for her husband's country. The girl stands in Scipia's traditional clothes and asks her father if he will take her back if Tariq treats her badly. Crying, the man confirms the princess's words, saying that he will never forgive the prince if he offends her. Ella turns to her maid, Emily, asking her to take care of the king. The heroine asks the crying Jack to take good care of the theater in her absence. The princess turns her gaze to the sage, who looks at her emotionlessly. Not seeing anything in the man's eyes, Ella turns away and heads to her carriage. Suddenly, the man loudly addresses Her Highness. While the sage hurriedly goes to the princess, people around begin to talk about rumors about their close relationship. The king looks at the ash-haired man in bewilderment. His Holiness asks to forgive the heroes these last moments. Sawile gets down on his knee, saying that he has not yet congratulated the girl on her wedding, so he gives her a gift that will protect her. Alan looks at the heroine with hope in his eyes. Ella takes no action, so her husband thanks her for the gift, saying that he will take it instead of his wife. However, the sage still continues to hold the gift tightly. Sawile persistently asks Her Highness to accept the gift. Without saying anything, Ella turns away from the ash-haired man and heads into the carriage. The sage's eyes show shock and incomprehension. While the princess climbs the steps, the man still remains on one knee. Lark Nuo asks to give the gift to him so that he can then give it to the girl. The heroine sets off on her journey, but the ash-haired man remains standing in the same place. While the newlyweds are traveling to the state of Scipia, Ella looks out the window with a bored look. Tariq asks with interest what the girl was looking at. The man says that the local landscapes are too deserted and all the beauty is in the capital, after which he offers the princess some wine. Her Highness takes away the glass and irritably asks her husband to turn away. At first, the third prince is angry because of the heroine's words, but when he looks at her, the negative emotions quickly disappear. The man blushes, realizing that his wife is very beautiful. Tariq says that he understands that Ella is against this marriage, but she had to leave, since a relationship with the sage could jeopardize the king's status. The princess indignantly asks if the third prince would like to be king, even if he is not the eldest son. The man says that of course he would like to, but he is glad that the heroine failed. Tariq comes close to the girl's face and says that he is happy because she became his wife. The prince slides his hand over Ella's shoulder and confesses to her that he has truly fallen in love with her. Realizing what could happen now, the princess puts the glass between their lips. With the same object, Her Highness pushes her husband away from her. While drinking wine, the princess asks the man if this is what he calls love. Tariq smiles and says Ella is truly special. The heroine tells the prince that she is tired and orders him to go out and close the door, to which he freely agrees. The princess falls on the pads, rejoicing that the man has finally left, and asks Aisha to take her things out. Ella opens the sage's gift and sees a huge amount of precious jewelry in it. The girl is surprised by this, saying that now the man must be crying into his pillow because of the money he spent. Hearing laughter behind her, the heroine asks Aisha what she is laughing at. After this, the princess remembers that all the people close to her sent her straight into the wolf's mouth, which is why her mood worsens again. Ella runs her hand over the jewelry and a smile appears on her face again. The servant asks His Highness if he would like them to teach the princess some manners, since she is too arrogant. Tariq fixes his fiery red eyes on the man. This look gives the servant goosebumps, and the prince says that in order to taste delicious food, you need to try. The lower official says that he is too stupid, thereby apologizing to the prince. Tariq notices something ahead and raises his left hand up, announcing that they have guests. Aisha asks Her Highness to be careful, but the girl rises from her seat, saying that they have arrived. The princess happily says that she knew this would happen. However, suddenly the heroine's mind becomes clouded, and her body stops obeying her. Aisha worriedly asks the exhausted mistress if she is okay. Ella realizes that she is in this state because of Tariq, who offered her a glass of wine. At this moment, the third prince is wondering whether his wife will like the sight of the sea with red sand, after which the man enters into battle with the unexpected guests. One of the opponents throws some blue powder at Ponpon's eye. Tariq turns towards his animal and sees a man in a robe in front of him. The prince shouts to the stranger not to even think about harming his wife. The man in the robe grins, telling His Highness not to worry, as he will soon meet the girl in the next world. Opponents attack the elephant by piercing its eye with a spear and cordoning off its legs with spiked wire. The place where the heroine was located falls from the animal to the ground. The prince looks at Panya Panya in horror. The stranger tells His Highness that he had better take care of himself and throws the same blue powder at him. Lark Nuo runs up to the fallen structure, shouting to the princess if she is okay. Ella says that she is fine and asks the knight if their people are outside now. Lark doesn't understand what the girl is talking about, so she explains that the sage's people are delayed, so they will have to save themselves. Seeing how hard Her Highness, the former general, is getting up, asks what happened, to which the heroine says that she just stood up abruptly. Suddenly, someone breaks into the carriage. This man is Prince Sipai, whose clothes and face are covered in blood. Ella pronounces her husband's name in shock. The princess is horrified by the man's appearance, seeing how badly he is injured. Tariq looks at the girl with his only good eye and asks for forgiveness for putting her in danger. The stranger in the robe tells the prince that he didn't think that it was because of Her Highness that he got involved in everything. The man smiles wickedly, warning the princess that he is here to escort her. Lark covers the girls with himself and takes out a sword. Ella clings to the knight and asks him to remember that at the right moment, he will need to leave her and protect the prince. However, the former general does not agree with her, since the safety of the princess comes first. Her Highness does not agree with him, since if something happens to Tariq on their territory, it will jeopardize all of Adalante. The heroine smiles calmly, saying that she will not die so easily. After some time, Felix, along with the rest of the knights, arrives at the scene. The man notices that the third prince of Scythia is sitting next to the carriage. Felix quickly heads towards Tariq, simultaneously asking where the princess is. However, when the man runs up to His Highness, he sees that his body has been pierced through with a sword. The knights approach their captain and say that they have not found either the girl or anyone alive. Felix angrily yells at his men to quickly split up and search everything for 3 miles. The sage approaches the Holy One and asks him how he found the sea monster hidden in his house. The high priest smiles and says that Adalante's safety is important, so he cannot be careless. Sawile emotionlessly thanks the man for doing his job so responsibly. At this moment, a servant approaches the sage and tells him some news. Alan's eyes fill with horror at what he hears. The man's hands begin to shake with anger when he hears from the servant words about the disappeared and the dead. His Holiness reports that he is leaving because he does not want to distract the ash-haired man from important matters. The sage's gaze is filled with hatred from the realization of whose hands this could be. Alan remembers someone's words that he would live to see people die and never die. A dog wanders through the desert, purposefully heading somewhere. Suddenly, she comes across someone's hand buried in the sand. Man's friend gives a signal to his masters, to which they ask Pupu what he found. The princess and her maid lie unconscious on the ground, half buried in the sand. Many thoughts about her past and present lives flash through the heroine's head. The last thing seen in the darkness is Tariq's back, protecting the girl from the sword. Ella regains consciousness, and cold sweat runs down her body. Aisha, sitting in front of her, begins to cry, rejoicing that her mistress has finally woken up. A girl with lush blonde hair sits next to the heroine and tells the princess that they are in the carriage of their group. Her Highness thanks for the water, and the stranger says that her name is Carrie and she is a dancer. A voice comes from behind the curtain, asking if the young ladies are awake and suggesting they set up camp to rest. Carrie invites the girls to come down, but asks them to walk carefully since they just woke up. When the dancer leaves, the heroine asks Aisha in a gloomy voice if Tariq is dead. To this question, the maid only sighs heavily. Tears begin to flow from the princess's eyes. Ella covers her face and says that it was she who killed the third prince. The heroine says that if it weren't for her, the man would have been able to save himself thanks to his fencing skills. Aisha, that this is not so, because the princess asked Lark to take the prince away. Her Highness shouts that Tariq has returned anyway to take the blow that was intended for her, and that she must die. The heroine says that her death should have come even earlier, and if she had not intervened in history, the prince would not have died, and the maid would not have ended up in the desert. However, Aisha does not agree with her mistress's words, saying that if it were not for the princess, she would not be alive now. The maid says that Her Highness has saved countless people from suffering and even now continues to protect Adalante from external enemies. The girl calms the mistress, saying that it is not she who should die, but those greedy people who attacked them. A sad smile appears on the heroine's face, red from tears. Ella thinks that her greed also led to this, because she did all this because she did not want to die. Carrie shouts joyfully from behind the door, telling the girls that the food is ready. The princess wipes away her tears, offering to talk about this later, and now go and eat. Aisha looks at the departing mistress with tears in her eyes, wondering what to do next. At the same time, the sage jumps forward as quickly as possible. Up ahead, Savale's men notice the princess's guardian knight. The ash-haired man stops right in front of the man, immediately asking him where Ella is. Without looking up, Lark says that they lost the girl while they were chasing the killers. For this answer, Mr. Nuo receives a whip on the cheek. The sage shouts furiously at the knight, calling him an idiot. Lark reports that Her Highness and her maid fled to the east, and the princess herself was in poor condition. Vale worriedly asks if the heroine was injured. The knight says through gritted teeth that Tariq died right before the girl's eyes, and she looked like a recruit who saw death for the first time on the battlefield. A messenger approaches Felix with some message. The man informs the gentleman that the state of Scipia has declared war on them. Felix wants to offer something to the sage, but he is stopped with a gesture. Ashhair tells Lark that he has a chance to atone. It's late evening, and a group of dancers begin dancing around the fire. Carrie approaches the princess sitting on the side, saying that they sing and dance well, so everyone in the desert knows them. Tired Ella agrees with the girl's words. The girl gets up and says that there is no sadness that cannot be dispelled by music. Carrie points ahead, saying that if you've lost your way, you just need to keep moving forward. The princess laughs because of the dancer's funny expression. The heroine reflects that it was too arrogant to try to change history, because in the end, she only hurt herself and others. Her Highness looks at the starry sky and thinks that everyone will be better off if she leaves. Ella agrees with Carrie again and asks if she can join them. Aisha approaches her mistress and asks her if she has any wishes, to which the heroine asks if she is having fun. The maid enthusiastically says that it was hard for her when she saw everyone dancing in the theater, but now she feels happy. The princess asks the girl if she wants to stay here, and Aisha thinks that her mistress wants to wait for the sage here. To this, the heroine shakes her head negatively. Ella says she won't be returning to Adalante since she joined Carrie's group and is now a dancer. Her Highness informs Aisha that she is now free and can go wherever she pleases. In the Oasis of the Wind, the merchant invites the wanderer to try his most unusual dishes and meet the best dancers in the world. The man asks if the dancers he is talking about are that good. The merchant says that you need to see it with your own eyes, but they only visit them when passing through. However, the man stops short when he sees the cart ahead and congratulates the wanderer, since he will be able to watch the dancers perform. The transport is driven by the group leader, an older man, Harry. Ella looks out of the curtained window of the carriage with interest. The wanderer wants to ask the merchant about the girl who looked out, but she quickly closes the curtain. The inhabitants of the Wind Oasis shout joyfully, greeting the group leader. Some people loudly call out to the dancers, wanting to see them as soon as possible. The girl gives Harry a signal that they can go out. The lead dancer, Carrie, warns the leader that they are unlikely to be able to pacify the residents. Seeing the dancer, the people begin to rejoice joyfully. Carrie offers her hand to Aisha, who has peeked out, asking her not to be afraid of noisy people, as they are simply very happy. When another dancer emerges from the cart, the wanderer recognizes her as someone. The luxuriously dressed princess dazzles the audience with her beauty. People raise a ruckus when they see the girl. The wanderer looks at the bright and beautiful eyes of Her Highness, and now he is sure that it is she. Suddenly, the heroine's gaze meets the gaze of the wanderer. Ella looks at the man carefully and realizes that his clothes are from the country of Luang. At night of the same day, all the inhabitants of the Wind Oasis gather around the fire and dance around it. The heroine looks at the people having fun with a happy smile. The same man approaches the girl and introduces himself to the princess as Louis Shang from the Luang State Trade Caravan. Ella says her name and asks how she can be useful. Louis says that although he did not see her dance, it seemed to him that she needed help. The heroine freezes for a moment upon hearing the words of a resident of the country of Luang. The man awkwardly looks at the girl, and even the knight cannot hide his reddened cheeks. Ella smiles and tells her interlocutor that he seems like a polite person, but he didn't start the conversation very tactfully. Lewis begins to recite a poem about a beautiful girl whom the hero unexpectedly met and quenched the desire that was hidden in his heart. The princess looks at the man in surprise, not at all expecting that his answer would be a poem. The amazed heroine wonders whether everyone in the past was so romantic and straightforward. Louis looks up at the girl, waiting for her to say something to him. However, the heroes are interrupted by Carrie, who calls Ella to their performance. The girl starts to leave, but when she hears a disappointed sigh behind her, she stops. The princess turns around and cheerfully asks the man if he wanted to watch him dance earlier. After this, Louis perks up and blushes even more. Looking at Ella's dance, a resident of the country of Luang compares her to a lightly soaring swan and a flying dragon, whose flexibility is magnificent. The man realizes that the girl really is the goddess of his heart. After the heroine's performance, the audience begins to enthusiastically applaud the dancer. People begin to thank the dancers for their performance, pouring gold coins into Harry's hat. As the girls begin to leave, Carrie tells Ella that a guy wants to say goodnight to her. After her words, the heroine turns around and sees Louis Sean behind her. The princess asks the man why he didn't go, since the performance was already over. Seeing that the Luang country resident is too embarrassed to say anything, Her Highness decides to leave. However, Louis stops the heroine, carefully touching her hand. Ella looks at the hand holding her for a couple of seconds, and then abruptly removes it, pressing it to her chest. The man apologizes for his behavior, saying that he did it without thinking. The princess puts on an emotionless face and tells Louis that she has to go. Carrie shudders when she sees the main character hurriedly entering the tent. The dancer expresses her fears to Ella that the man is not her type. The princess sits down on the carpet and says that she refused Louis, to which Carrie says that in their troupe, there are no restrictions on personal life. The girl says that she has been dating different people for a whole year. She also checks with Her Highness whether she considers this depravity. Ella says that everyone has the right to live the way they want. After these words, Carrie approaches the heroine's face, advising her to have fun with that man because they will soon go to Luang. However, the princess refuses the dancer, saying that she did not appreciate Louis's perseverance, to which the girl asks in this case not to regret it in the future. Carrie then looks outside and sees that a resident of the country of Luang is still standing in front of their tent. Louis Shang enters the hut without taking his eyes off the floor. Manager Feng asks his master why he is so depressed. The man sits down and says that he is fine. Louis asks Manager Feng if he is really that unattractive, to which the man says that there is no person who would not like a nobleman. In response to the manager's answer, the resident of the country Luang smiles sadly, saying that he turned out to be a useless person from a noble family. Louis warns Fang that he will be leaving tomorrow. The next morning, a group of dancers are already packing their things to hit the road. The nobleman approaches Ella and asks her where she is going now. Carrie sits down next to the girl and happily replies that they are on their way to the state of Luang. The dancer asks the man to introduce her to friends who are as beautiful as he is. These words make Louis's face so red that it looks more like a ripe tomato. Seeing such a reaction, Carrie laughs, calling the man very cute. Ella turns to the nobleman and says that the dancer did not mean to do anything wrong. Louis excitedly says that he would like the group to go with him. The nobleman says that the road to Luang is dangerous now, but his people will be able to protect them. When it begins to get dark, both groups take a break. Manager Fang notices that his master always looks only in one direction. Then the man decides to shout to his neighbors that they met here by fate, so he offers to have fun together. Carrie happily agrees to the invitation and tries to take Ella with her, who refuses in every possible way. As a result, the heroes are seated together, and an awkward silence hangs between them. Louis asks the princess if she feels uncomfortable. The girl says that everything is fine and thanks him for taking them with him. Her Highness then decides to ask the man why he is so interested in her. Louis scratches his cheeks awkwardly, not knowing how to respond. Ella says that the nobleman is the same as everyone else who is fooled by her appearance. The man says that he has no dirty thoughts and just wanted to make friends. The heroine does not understand why he chose her, because for Louis she is just a foreign dancer. The nobleman looks up and says that all the young gentlemen are just birds locked in a cage. And the dancers are free, like birds in the sky, so he envies them. However, the man was not interested in the girl for this reason. Louis points his finger at the girl's eyes, saying that there is so much anxiety and doubt in them. The man smiles and says that their eyes are very similar. Ella turns away and fervently asks if the wandering dancer is a person of the same breed as a nobleman. Louis says that his family has great influence in the state of Luang. The hero's father died, and since he was the only man in the family, he had to take his place early. However, Louis was too young, so his mother took care of business, even though everyone said that he was the head of the house. This year, she brought a 7-year-old boy with her and forced him to give up his rights. The hero calls it funny that 18 years have passed since the death of his father, but for some reason, everyone turns a blind eye to the fact that he has a little son. Ella asks incomprehensibly that people really accepted such an outrageous lie. The man says that this is true, but he is glad, because now he is free. It's just that those who support Louis's mother act without a twinge of conscience. But since their family depends on the well-being of many people, he worries about them. The nobleman says that although he does not know what happened to Ella, he still feels that they are very similar. In words that they seem to be free, but are full of anxiety that they will not let them go. The heroine clenches her hand into a fist. Images of people close to her flash through the princess's thoughts. Ella closes her eyes as she feels that tears are beginning to accumulate in them due to the fact that her disappearance is the only sure outcome. The heroine says that, of course, she cannot help, but she is ready to be an attentive listener to the man. The girl holds out her hand to confirm that they have agreed, but Louis looks at her blankly. Instead of shaking hands, the man crosses his palms and thanks Ella. The princess realizes that in the state of Luang, it seems that holding hands is not customary. A wanderer comes to the wind oasis and shows someone a portrait, asking if the merchant has seen the girl depicted on it. The man says that the sheet depicts a new member of Harry's troupe and warns travelers that she has already left. The merchant reports that the troupe left with a trading group from Luang, and one of the merchants already had his eye on the dancer, so the wanderer was late. Long ash-green hair flutters in the wind. Having received the necessary information, the man hits the road again. The trading party and Harry's troupe finally arrive in Luang State. A girl from the John family asks Mr. Jun to let them into the city, since they were robbed by robbers. The guard pushes the woman and the child away, saying that he doesn't care about her family's last name, since he's only interested in money. Next, a caravan approaches the man, and he begins to list how much and what they must pay for. However, Manager Feng asks to look at his master's admit card. Seeing the badge, the guard apologizes and welcomes the travelers to the city. As the carts leave, the man spits, saying that he has no luck today. The manager shouts to the heroes that they have already been placed and asks them to follow him. Louis carefully helps Ella off the carriage. The man worriedly asks if the girl is tired after the journey and whether she needs to call a doctor. The heroine says that she is fine and asks the nobleman how large the down payment is when entering the city. The princess says that the price she heard could be a whole year's income for some. The girl asks why the high price was set and assumes that it is to prevent the appearance of spies. However, the answer to the question turns out to be greed and power over property. Ella suggests that taxes here are not low either, which Louis confirms. The heroine is amazed that people who work hard receive only 20%. The man says that there have been many uprisings, the country and people are in distress, and only in the capital does a false sense of peace persist. Ella remembers that the same thing could happen to her country and says that if the ruler doesn't fix anything, the state will simply disappear. The princess reflects that in order to calm the people, she will need to change their minds. But this is difficult to do. Louis suggests coming back to this later and asks the girl to go take a break after a long journey. The heroine opens huge doors leading to the place where the dancers are temporarily staying. Ella is met by Aisha, who begins to ask about her closeness with Mr. Louis. The maid gives the princess a cup of water. Aisha says that this cannot be done, since Her Highness should not abandon the sage. From these words, the heroine chokes on water. Ella blushes, saying that this is complete nonsense and that she and Louis are just friends. Aisha tells the princess that their relationship with the sage can be hidden from strangers, but not from those close to them. The heroine gives the cup back and says that if Saw Weil needed it, he would not marry her off, sending her to certain death. Her Highness asks them to forget about the sage and warns that tomorrow they are going to look at the beauties of the kingdom of dragons. In the desert, the ash-haired man finds an earring belonging to Princess Adalante. Looking at the decoration, the man asks Ella to stop swearing because she can do whatever she wants, no matter who they meet. In the evening, the princess and Louis go to the Flower Goddess Festival. The rest of the dancers could not go to the celebration because they had not yet settled into the new place. The man awkwardly says that he didn't think that traveling dancers could have such problems. As an apology, Louis offers to pay for all of the princess's purchases today. Ella happily warns the nobleman that she will not stand on ceremony with the money of such a rich man. The girl collects a huge number of souvenirs from the festival, which later end up in the hands of Louis. The heroes come to a diner, where a man orders tea and cakes in a tired voice. The princess apologizes for not being able to resist buying things with flowers, to which the man says that this is typical for women. To the side of Louis, they notice a little girl who offers the gentleman to buy a flower for his beloved. However, the man pushes the child away, telling her to stay away from him. The girl flies straight at the nobleman. The princess notices that in the child's hands, instead of a flower, there is a small dagger. Ella tries to warn the man about this, but does not have time. The bladed weapon pierces Louis's stomach and blood pours out. The girl cries a lot, saying that if she doesn't kill the man, her mother will die. The princess runs up to the nobleman and begins to press the wound, saying that she will immediately bring a doctor. The man hugs the heroine tightly, causing her to freeze in surprise. It turns out that Louis was dodging the swords flying towards them, which wounded him in the arm and cheek. Ella remembers the death of Tariq, who died right before her eyes. The heroine grabs the recently purchased vessel. The girl throws an object at the attacker and it shatters into pieces on his hand. Immediately behind the vessel, a lantern flies towards the criminal. Ella doesn't hesitate for a second and grabs Louis's hand to quickly leave before the killers come to their senses. The fire in the lantern begins to spread throughout the criminal's body and eventually sets him on fire. The doctor tells Fang that the internal organs are not damaged, and if the man takes the prescribed medications, then everything will be fine. The main character looks at the lying, wounded nobleman with concern in her eyes. Louis asks the girl why she looks so guilty, since he was the one who got her into trouble. The princess clenches her hands into fists and says that tomorrow she will leave the country. Ella furrows her brow, thinking that she shouldn't let more people get into trouble. Louis puts his hand on the girl's arms, asking her not to leave. The heroine shudders at such an unexpected gesture from the nobleman. The man asks if the girl has a place where she can return and asks to stay under his protection. Ella gloomily asks Louis if she heard the question correctly about whether there is a place she can escape. The nobleman says loudly that he did not want to offend the heroine with these words, but does not have time to say anything more as someone interrupts them. The Queen's envoy enters the room and says that she has sent an invitation to Harry's group that they will perform a dance. However, Louis immediately flatly refuses this request. The messenger smiles as he asks the man if he is trying to disobey the ruler. Ella rises from her seat and says that they have received an order and are ready to carry it out. When everyone leaves, Louis takes the main character away, warning her that she is not allowed there and he will order you to be escorted out immediately. However, the heroes do not go far as the man's wound opens. The princess asks the man if he has a way to drive away her group. The man understands that if the girl leaves, the rest of the dancers will bear responsibility. Ella warns Louis that she won't run away alone. The heroine decides that no matter how her actions affect the story, she won't care. From now on, the princess will only do what she really wants. The girl leaves, leaving Louis alone, and after a while he shouts to the servants that he is returning to the palace. The man thinks that if the queen needs to take everything from him to become happy, then she will regret it. Sitting majestically on the throne, the queen looks menacingly at the man who has come to her. The woman decides that there is no point in keeping a man kneeling in front of her, since he is not able to cope with his job. At Her Majesty's words, the mercenary begins to tremble with fear. The man asks the queen to give him another chance, promising not to let her down again. However, the guards take away the resisting man, while his partner has already left this world. The child looks at what is happening with horror in his eyes, and his body trembles non-stop. The queen puts her hand on the boy's shoulder, reassuring him that if he behaves well, his mother will not be strict with him. The mother tells her son not to follow Louis's example, otherwise he will never be able to achieve great things with such actions. The dancers head to the palace of the Luang kingdom. Ella apologizes to Carrie for dragging her into this, but the girl is even glad to visit such a place. The heroine calms down, but asks the girl to leave her and protect the group if something goes wrong. Carrie gives a thumbs up, saying that traveling dancers have no conscience. The princess looks at the palace with caution, but in her heart she is determined about everything. The girls go inside and greet the queen, saying that it is an honor for them to dance for her. However, Carrie interrupts Her Majesty, asking her a question about which of the dancers is called Ella. The guards push the girls in the back and they fall to their knees. The princess looks at the queen with all the hatred in her eyes. The queen notices this look and realizes that it is Ella, after which the woman invites her to kill Lua, and then she will save the girl's life. Her Highness, without hesitation, replies that she refuses this offer. The woman closes her eyes in disappointment, telling the guards to begin. The queen's servant attacks Carrie first, kicking her. Ella shouts that they are residents of another country and asks the queen if she is not afraid of starting a war in this way. Her Majesty warns the heroine that another second and their lives will cease to mean anything. The princess realizes that the queen was not affected by such words, so she quickly begins to think about how she can gain some time. Ella, in an innocent voice, tells the woman that she will do anything, but first asks her to explain why she needs Louis to die. The queen gives a hand sign to the servant to take her son out of the room. Her Majesty says that Lua is the deposed king of the state of Luang and her son. The heroine feigns surprise that the man is the queen's son, but still insists on finding out the reason for the desire to kill him. The woman does not answer this and orders Ella to return, accept Louis's advances, and kill him. The skirt of the heroine's dress is pulled by a crying Carrie. The princess apologizes to her friend for getting her into this. Her Highness decides that enough time has passed and tells the queen that she still won't let them go. Ella says that since a woman raised her hand against her own son, she certainly won't let the pathetic ants escape. The queen grins, saying that the man never came, so there is no point in delaying. The heroine realizes that the ruler of Luyana has calculated everything, but at that moment she is grabbed by the hair. The guards draw their weapons, intending to kill the girl. The princess closes her eyes, believing in Louis to the last. The next moment, the guards fall to the floor from the prince's assistants, dressed in the same clothes. The nobleman tells his mother that she is crossing a line by trying to execute his men. The queen grins and says that she thought that her son would never cross the threshold of this palace in his life. The man approaches Ella, helping her up, and says that if the woman wanted to see him, then she doesn't have to kill someone. Louis apologizes that he is late, but the heroine says that it is not he who should ask for forgiveness because she was used as bait. The prince covers the girl's lips, saying that for her sake he will go through fire and water. The queen is informed about Ella, and the woman asks her son if he would feel the same way if he found out that she was an Adalantean spy. Hearing this, the heroine opens her eyes wide in surprise. However, Louis tells his mother that this is impossible. Her Majesty decides to address the princess on her status, asking her if she is right. The man turns his head towards the girl, and his eyes show understanding. Ella closes her eyes, not believing that anyone could know her true identity. The heroine looks at the trembling Aisha, Carrie, and the rest of the dancers, realizing that she is obliged to protect them. The princess confidently replies that the queen is right. However, Her Highness says that it was too rash to call her a spy. The ruler asks her son if he pleads guilty to concealment. Ella tells the queen that the man did not know who she really was. The princess says that Louis is quite easy to deceive, so such accusations flatter him. The heroine directs her gaze to the queen, warning her that she still cannot cause any harm to the nobleman. The girl understands that she could just as easily have been killed, thereby having a much greater influence on the man. Ella asks the queen if she agrees that she wanted to make life difficult for her son and increase her authority. The woman doesn't even raise an eyebrow at these words, but only looks at the heroine with a grin. The dancers and the prince leave the palace, and he orders the girls to be taken away from the city. Carrie tries to convince the man that the princess said all this to protect them, so she begs Louis not to let her die. However, the servants forcefully take the dancer away without giving her the opportunity to finish. Manager Fang asks the master what they should do now. At the same time, the main character is hanging in chains in a dungeon and bleeding. While the girl is beaten with a whip over and over again, the queen asks her whether she thought well. Ella replies that she decided everything when she sacrificed herself for the safety of others. Her Majesty realizes that she underestimated the princess, so she is very interested in how much longer the heroine can endure. The woman gives the order to continue, and the girl begins to be beaten again. Her Highness tells herself to hold on, because this is the price to pay for the lives taken. The image of the sage appears in the princess's thoughts, and she wonders whether he would be upset if she died for another. The queen is informed that the flogging was carried out all night, but brought nothing. Then the woman gives the order for the execution. On the streets, Luang residents are discussing the petitioner's order to execute a pretty spy caught in the palace. Savale, hearing people talking, politely asks if they know where she is from and what her name is. The man hesitantly says that the girl is a spy for Adalante. Realizing that the villagers are talking about Her Highness Ella, the sage jumps on his horse. Those gathered in the square discuss the news that the abdicated king was harboring a foreign spy to stage a coup. The people think that if not for their wise ruler who had caught the spy, then many people would have died. They start throwing food at the princess, wishing her death. The girl thinks that they really told the truth on TV, that people throw rotten eggs in such situations. The heroines tie their hands tightly with a rope and throw them back, causing pain. The queen's servant announces that Ella, who seduced the king and staged a rebellion, is sentenced to lynching. The princess fearfully thinks that this is the same type of painful execution when small fragments are cut off from a person's body over a long period. Her Highness closes her eyes, realizing that this is truly the end, since after this she is unlikely to be able to return to her world. At the moment when the servant brings the dagger to the girl, an arrow pierces his body. The savior turns out to be the prince of this country, Louis Shan. The man shouts to the people not to allow themselves to be deceived, since Ella is not a spy, but came from their sister country, Adalante. The princess looks at the nobleman in surprise, thinking that he decided to rebel. Louis shouts that his mother is threatening him, extorting money and plunging the people into poverty. And now, in order to maintain her power, she is going to execute his wife. At this moment, the heroine looks at the man in bewilderment, not understanding why she suddenly became someone's wife. The prince says that despite the fact that he abdicated the throne, he cannot watch how everything his father created is trampled into the dirt. The man calls to clear the throne for the sake of the people and the state of Luang. His Highness's warriors begin to fight the queen's warriors, while Louis heads towards the heroine. Her Majesty's servant puts a sword to the princess's throat, telling the prince not to come closer. Louis tells General Shin that if he lets the girl go, he will forget about this incident. The general cuts the rope and releases Ella. The prince thanks Shin for his wisdom, but stops short a moment later. The man smirks and swings his sword, shouting at his Highness to catch the girl. The princess looks at the blade flying at her and thinks that previously she had no hope of surviving, but now that there is hope, he will die. The sword flies past the girl's face as she stumbles and falls down. Someone's sword flies at General Shin, piercing him right through. Louis thanks the knight for his loyalty and saving the royal concubine. The sage chuckles at the man's words and asks Her Highness about her new position. Savale frowns when she sees the bleeding wounds on the princess's body. The ash-haired man carefully strokes the girl's wounded cheek. His Highness Louis rushes quickly towards the heroes. Vale takes off his cape and wraps it around the heroine, after which he takes her in his arms. The man looks at the prince with a contemptuous look, making it clear that he should not interfere. Louis flinches, not expecting to see such a look. The sage puts Ella on a horse, and together they ride away from this place. The man shouts for them to stop, but the warrior stops him, saying that he and his men will save the princess. But now there is a more important situation. Louis decides to leave command of the rescue operation to his warrior, while he himself remains to fight his opponents. Savale carries the heroine on his shoulder, but she tries in every possible way to get off him. Seeing a girl coming out of one of the houses, the sage puts his finger to his lips and smiles sweetly, thereby asking him to be quiet. The flushed Luang resident is covered in a bright blush due to the man's appearance. The The girl goes back into the house but leaves a gap for peeking. Vale sits Ella down and asks her if she's so happy not to be a princess that she doesn't recognize him anymore. The main character turns away from the ashen-haired man, saying that she should not remember such a scoundrel. Looking at the girl with concern, the sage says that he is offended to receive such gratitude for the journey and salvation. Ella notes to herself that seeing Sawile so embarrassed is very rare. The princess thinks that the man appeared so suddenly, as if in a dream. The sage suggests that seeing him now, Her Highness has a hard time accepting that he cares about her. The heroine blushes and shouts that her feelings should not concern him at all. On the street, the scream of the warrior Prince Louis is heard, who reports that the man is very worried about her, so he asks to leave. Ella happily says that His Highness sent a man for her. The girl opens her mouth to let you know where she is. Vale presses the girl's lips together, causing her to look at him indignantly. The sage asks the girl in a serious tone to be obedient. Otherwise, he will have to shut her up. Ash-haired takes the princess in his arms and jumps over the high fence with her. The prince's warriors come to the place where the heroine's voice sounded. The men notice a girl trembling with fear in the doorway. His Highness's servants quickly return to him. The warrior tells the prince that they failed, and the princess may have already been killed. Louis shouts that this is impossible because that guy saved her. The warrior says that the man is a subordinate of the queen, and the girl's body is hanging on the outer wall of the palace. From the words of the servant, the prince's legs become weak, and he begins to fall, but the knights catch him. Louis shouts to his mother that since she treats him like this, then he won't be petty. The nobleman raises his sword to the sky and shouts that they are heading to the palace. The sage brings Ella to a house and asks her to rest a little, since they will leave him when it gets dark. Vale gives the girl a cup of tea, but she does not accept it, saying that she is not going anywhere. The man gloomily asks if the heroine needs an antidote in that case. Ella screams that if she avoids death now, then next time it may overtake her. Vale takes the princess's hand to give her the cup and says there won't be a next time. The sage accidentally touches the wound on his hand, causing Her Highness to pull back her hand and spill the tea on herself. The man gently touches Ella's hand, asking if she's okay. The girl throws away the ash-haired man's hand and shouts at him that her condition should not bother him. The main character says that one day she fell for the sage's lies and went to certain death. The princess reminds Vale of the name Alan of cooperation, and that all the lies were done only for his own good. Her Highness believes that she was just a pawn, but there was hope within her that she had special significance. With tears in her eyes, the heroine asks the man if he was grinning as he fooled her and watched her approach her death. Ella asks Sawile if he liked her face before he died. Seeing the confused face of the sage, the girl grins. The princess says that she was previously caught in the ash-haired man's snare because she had nowhere to go. However, this time Ella does not want such a fate for herself, so it doesn't matter to her what they do to her. Everything will be better than being with the sage. Vale grabs the heroine's hand, to which she irritably screams for him to let her go. The man hugs the princess to himself and asks her for forgiveness. Ella does not calm down and shouts at the ash-haired man that his apologies are of no use. Vale hugs Her Highness even tighter, saying that he is truly sorry. The sage admits that for a long time he thought only about Adalante, but when he first saw Ella, he realized that this was a turning point in the history of the country, so he took the opportunity. The girl bites the man's shirt and tears begin to fall from her eyes even more. Vale says that only when she saw the heroine's wedding did she regret it and realized that she had deceived everyone, considering her flirting and jealousy to be feigned. The sage admits that his attention was not false, but his feelings were artificial. The hero apologizes that he was not there when the princess was in danger and was scared. Ash-haired swears that from now on he will always be close and no one can separate them. After some time, the sage tells Ella that it is time for them to go. The main character, who has already received first aid, shakes her head, saying that she does not want to leave. Vale sighs as he thought they had come to an agreement. The sage tells the girl that the rebels have already captured the palace, and the city is in chaos, so they will not be able to stay. Ella says that she understands this, and that is why she cannot leave. Night falls, and the heroes find themselves near the entrance to the palace. When the guards leave, the girl breathes out a sigh of relief. Savale gloomily says that if Her Highness is so afraid, then there is no need to take risks for this person. Ella grabs the man by the robe, saying that if it weren't for Louis, they would not have met, and besides, she promises to repay him for his help. Ashhair leans towards the heroine, asking if she will repay the favor by staying here and becoming a princess. To this, Ella nervously says that she had never even thought about it. The girl says that Louis is too stupid to be an instrument for the implementation of someone's plans, and her death will help him act even more desperately. Vale pats the girl on the head, saying that he is afraid that they might fake the corpse and make her disappear. The heroes go up to the roof and see that there are too many guards around, so they won't be able to get through. Ella says that there is a large hall below, and then takes out one of the roof planks. However, the heroine's plans are not destined to come true, since behind one plank there is another layer. Vale asks the girl to hurry up as the guards will be back soon. The princess closes her eyes, trying to remember the situation inside. Ella visually remembers that there is now an imperial throne under her, and there are windows on both sides of it. The heroine remembers something and bites her finger. Her Highness writes on a tablet with her blood that she is alive. Savale grabs the princess and jumps to the ground with her. While falling, the girl manages to throw that very plank, which lands on the porch of the palace. The guards notice some movement in the darkness and sound the alarm. The heroes escape from the city and hide behind a tree, trying to catch their breath after escaping. Ella laughs raggedly and says that this is so awkward. The princess asks herself for whom she is doing this, and jokingly says that, of course, for her beloved man. Savale makes a stony face in response to this, not appreciating the girl's joke. An announcement is heard throughout the city that King Shang has killed the Demon Queen. Ella looks at the city with horror in her eyes and realizes that this is Louis's order. The sage covers the girl's eyes, saying that this is power, and you need to be able to control its power, otherwise you will be consumed. However, for the heroine, the man was a very gentle person, to which Sawwile says that character does not matter. The sage says that rights can bring happiness to a large number of people only in the right hands. Vale looks carefully at Ella and clarifies that this must be a person who really wants to change everything for the better. The princess removes the man's hand from her eyes and suggests returning to Adalante. The heroes arrive in some deserted and abandoned city. Her Highness asks the sage where they have arrived. Vale says that this is the town of Damu. It is located not far from the capital, and they will stay here temporarily, since the girl is not yet allowed to appear in her homeland. Ella tries to find out from the sage why there are so few people on the streets, but does not receive any answer. The heroine looks at the man suspiciously, realizing that he is definitely hiding something. Savale suggests that the princess rest a little and wait for their escort, after which they will make plans. The girl notices that this place does not look like where a sage would stay. Ella jokes that the man is broke and playfully asks if she should earn some money. Vale hugs the heroine from behind, praising her hardworking and beloved princess. The dancers joyfully watch the couple, touched by their reunion. The sage says that they are here for a short time, and then asks if Her Highness wants to see someone first. Ella smiles and asks the man if he won't be jealous if she really wants to meet someone. The heroine moves away and decides to listen to the sage. The princess turns her gaze to Sawwile and seriously asks him if he would lie to her again. The ash-haired man smiles politely and replies that of course he didn't. After this, the heroine goes to the top floor. Vale asks the dancers to be located on the first floor and trusts Aisha with the cooking. The sage ties a note to the falcon and sends it to the recipient. Someone's scream is heard from behind the door, calling the ash-haired man for lunch. When Vale goes downstairs, he sees that Ella is persistently asking Aisha about something. Noticing the sage, the heroine turns to him and asks in a loud tone whether the state of Scipia declared war on them because of her. The maid bows guiltily, apologizing for telling everything to the princess. The man sighs, realizing that a long and difficult conversation awaits him ahead. Ashhair approaches Her Highness and says that this is not her fault, in response to which he is called a liar. Ella shouts that the King of Scipia personally led the campaign and demands that her father hand over Tariq's murderer and considers her guilty. Savale says that this is not so, since the High Priest's people got rid of the prince. The man is trying to convince the girl that this is all a conspiracy that has nothing to do with her. The princess yells at the sage, asking him if he plans to hide her while the citizens of her country lose their lives. Ashhair says that he will soon end the war, and there is no need to take risks. But Ella says that the quickest thing to do would be to just give her up. A voice behind the girl agrees with her, but warns that without the commander, everyone would have been killed even earlier. Larkno and Jack enter the room, who is very happy that Her Highness is okay. Ella looks at the newcomers in surprise, not believing that they are standing right in front of her. The princess happily runs to the theater manager, shouting that she missed him very much. The sage does not allow the girl to hug Jack, saying that they need to go the other way. Vale scolds the heroine for not coming all this way so they could hug. Seeing that Jack is about to burst into tears, Larknuo hugs the young man, trying to calm him down. The heroes sit down at the table and begin to discuss affairs in the state of Scipia, saying that the kingdom has surrounded Adalante. Ella is surprised that that country reacted so quickly, and her father did not take any action. Lark tells the girl that the sage went on a search immediately after the princess disappeared, and the king's people took advantage of this, causing them trouble. Her Highness looks at the ash-haired one in surprise after the knight's words. Jack says the Scipia state sent someone to spread false information. The heroine realizes that this information was that she killed Prince Tariq and disappeared. Savale puts his hand on Ella's arms to support the girl. The man says that the ruler of Scipia can be convinced of the accuracy of this information, and it is not clear which part of the army acted out of revenge and which for their own personal gain. The sage says that if he had not disappeared, the heroes would not have had to leave the city. Lark agrees with the ash-haired man and reminds him that the kingdom did not attack the city directly, and the crown prince was asked to negotiate. Jack says that whenever they disagreed with the prince, they started a war against an external enemy. Ella is surprised when the young man says that if not for Reno's initiative, the crown prince would have already become king. Lark explains that they are allies, and although the Pope's faction tried to confuse him with several tricks, he managed. The princess notices the bandages on the guardian knight's chest and realizes what techniques we are talking about. The heroine sincerely thanks the knight and Jack for their help. Lark looks away, awkwardly saying that they shouldn't be thanked. Seeing such a relaxed atmosphere between the heroes, the sage begins to get angry. The man interrupts them, reminding them that it was really hard work. Savale tells the girl that the Pope intends to kill the king, but the conditions for peace negotiations must be harsh, so he is confident that everything will be successful. The sage says that if His Majesty signed an unequal treaty, he would become a traitor to Adalante, and there would be a possibility of his assassination. Then he turns to Lark and looks at him warningly. Ella muses that a prince who stopped the war would increase his support and eventually become king. The sage and the princess simultaneously end the heroine's thoughts, saying that now their main task is to end the war earlier. The heroes cross their little fingers, and a romantic atmosphere reigns between them. Larknuo applauds the couple, saying that in reality everything is much more complicated, since he will survive a few more battles with the king, and then he can order a coffin. The heroine turns away in embarrassment, and the sage says that he himself will go on a campaign. To this, the guardian knight indignantly says that Savale himself rushes into battle, while the high priest is only thinking about how to deal with him. The main character turns her head towards the sage after Mr. Nuo's words. The man hides his gaze, avoiding the girl. Ella understands that to end the war, it is not necessary to win it. It is enough to simply hand her over. However, the sage ignores this path, preferring to risk himself. The heroine looks tenderly at Sawile, thinking that the man rushes from one extreme to another. The princess says that she has a proposal, but the sage immediately rejects it. The man warns Ella that no matter what she says, he will still refuse, as he plans to solve the problem with Scipia on his own. The princess asks the sage whether he will refuse if she proposes marriage. Vale, hearing this, turns around in surprise. The girl touches the tip of the man's nose with her fingertip and asks him if he is sure of his refusal. After this, the heroine smiles even wider, saying that she is joking. The sage begins to look at the princess with irritation, angry at her words. Ella tells Alan that she hates war, hates the smell of gunpowder and ashes, and tears. The princess says that she can give the sage time to find a way to end everything, but can the common people, the victims of these games, wait? The action moves to the camp of the Sippy estate. The guards stop the cart to check who is in it. Harry addresses the glorious warriors, saying that they are a troupe of traveling dancers and would like to ask them for some food. The guard pushes the man, saying that he is tired of living since he dared to beg in the camp. The leader of the group of dancers says that there is war everywhere, and they traveled to several cities, but did not find food anywhere. A warrior points a sword at a trembling man who begs for mercy. Carrie stands in front of Harry, begging the warrior not to touch her father, and offers to dance and drink with him in exchange for food. The rest of the guards run up to the commander. The dancers hung on the red-faced warriors, begging them to help them. Sitting next to the group leader is Her Highness Ella, who smiles that everything is going according to plan. Hearing the commotion, His Excellency, the general, decided to approach and find out what was going on. The general eagerly looks at the dancers' breasts. Smiling widely, the man asks the girl what's wrong. Carrie plaintively says that they are traveling performers and could dance for them in exchange for food. The rest of the girls join the blonde one, beginning to beg the general to agree to this proposal. After thinking a little, the man agrees. His Excellency squeezes the dancers' cheeks and says that their performance can help them take their mind off days of fighting. One of the warriors tries to dissuade the general, but the man insists on his own. His Excellency shows the girls a tent where they can stay and notices that one of them is hidden by a robe. The man reaches for the hood to take it off and see who is hiding behind it. Carrie is horrified at the thought that Her Highness will now be exposed. The blonde one pulls the general's hand, innocently asking if he decided to go to someone else when he had already chosen her. Feeling the girl's warmth, His Excellency breaks into a satisfied smile. The man calls the girl a little scoundrel and says that he will go get himself in order. Carrie blows a kiss, telling the general that she's looking forward to it. His Excellency orders his man to report to His Majesty about the new arrivals. Carrie enters the tent and exhales with relief. Blonde tells the princess that she is very brave because she almost got caught by that old pervert. Ella chuckles, saying that, in her opinion, the dancer is satisfied with everything. Her Highness gets serious and reminds her that if anything happens to Carrie, someone will kill her. Previously, the main character stated that she was going to meet the King of Scythia to tell him the truth. Then the man categorically refused this idea, saying that the girl would not be a bargaining chip. Ella replied that she was not looking for death and was certainly not going to take responsibility for Tariq's death. The princess asked and said that if the king loses his temper and kills her, then everything will not be in vain. First, they will meet, and then she will decide what to tell him. Sawile wanted to refuse this idea again, but the girl covered his mouth. The heroine asked the sage to believe in her and promised that she would not risk her life. Ella said she had a safe exit and then looked behind her. In that place stood a dancer who did not understand anything. Evening came, and all the warriors gathered around the fire awaiting the arrival of the dancers. When the girls finally appear in the field of vision of the men, joyful cries are heard around them. The actors begin to perform, and one of the warriors makes a count. The man notices that one dancer is missing, but the general says that most likely someone has already taken her away. However, the warrior says that he will still go and check. At the same time, Ella is hiding in the shadows behind the other tents. Peering at the place where people are now having fun, the girl realizes that the king, of course, is not there. The heroine running past the tents is noticed by dancing Carrie. The princess decides to take a chance and go straight to the main tent. Blonde tells the rest of the cast that they need to make sure everyone is looking only here. The fair-haired dancer decides to do this, attracting all eyes with her graceful movements. The main character heads to the tent, at the entrance to which there are guards. Suddenly, someone grabs the princess's hand, asking where she is going. A man with blonde hair and expressive eyes, the color of the sun, looks carefully at Her Highness. Quickly collecting herself after her fright, Ella innocently says that she is very hungry and just wanted to find some food. The guard understands the girl's words as a desire to steal something and says that he suspects her of being a spy. The heroine is surrounded by warriors pointing their weapons at her. However, the men are stopped by a voice coming from the tent and allowing the princess to enter. Ella looks carefully at the entrance to the room and realizes that the target has been detected. Her Highness understands that now it's time to move on to the crowning number. After the girl comes inside, the king informs him that there is no need to serve him. The heroine is surprised that the man thinks that she is voluntarily doing this. The princess says that she was just hungry and decided to look into this tent. In response to this, the king fixes his fierce gaze on Her Highness. Ella says in a trembling voice that there is war everywhere and it's hard for them. The man points to the side, saying that the food is at her disposal. The princess looks at the indicated place and notices that there are indeed various dishes there. However, the girl notices that the king did not even touch any of the food. Ella carefully asks if His Majesty is not in a bad mood. Her Highness immediately says that she doesn't want to mind her own business, but she can lighten the mood with a dance. The man categorically refuses to do this. The main character says that in her hometown, they say that if you speak out, a person can feel better. The king again fixes his menacing gaze on the dancer. This sends chills through the princess's body with fear. Ella begins to apologize, but is interrupted by His Majesty, who says that the girl was sent by Surveil. The heroine's eyes open wide in surprise. The king asks the heroine to tell the sage to provide the killer. Otherwise, Adalante will be buried with his son. The princess smiles confidently at this request. The girl asks the ruler whether he wants to get Her Highness or let off steam. Ella reproaches the king for actually looking for a reason to attack and initially planning to destroy their state. The main character says that a man knows better what was done directly for Tariq and what was done for personal ambitions. The king angrily hits the table and rises from his seat. The princess shouts that ordinary people are not to blame for anything, and His Majesty, having lost one child, wishes the same for millions of others. Just as Ella finishes speaking, a fresh wound appears on her cheek from King Scipia's sword. The next day, a group of traveling dancers leaves the camp. Carrie worriedly asks the princess if she is okay. The main character says that the issue with the king has been successfully resolved. At the same time, His Majesty looks at the portrait of his son and praises him for his good taste. Chiron Adalante sits on his throne and asks his son if there is any news from those sent to the enemy camp. Kalium tells his father that those people were never able to get inside. Hearing such news, the king slaps the prince and calls him a non-entity. Liam says that they did everything as His Majesty said. The ruler of Scipia turned out to be too stubborn. Then Chiron tells his son that he is of no use, so he will find a replacement for him. The king turns to his subjects, wanting to know their thoughts. People do not dare to raise their gaze to the ruler. The high priest addresses His Majesty, expressing the idea that the best solution would be the negotiations proposed by Mo Tyler. However, Chiron refuses, since Scipia put forward two harsh conditions, one of which is the extradition of the missing Ella. Tyler informs his father that he spoke with Scipia's envoy, and he agreed to replace the princess with 100 people in order to bury them with Tariq. Seeing the king's dismay, the Holy One reminds him that the common good is above all, to which all those gathered agree. Suddenly, a voice is heard asking everyone if the common good lies in killing innocent people. The princess enters the throne room, dressed in a luxurious blue dress decorated with pearls. Ella grins and says that after such words, Mr. High Priest seems to her even more noble than before. Mo Tyler yells at his sister, not understanding how she dared to come back here. The Holiness interrupts the first prince, saying that since the princess has returned, no one will have to atone for her sins. Her Highness approaches the man, asking who will compensate for the harm caused to her as a victim. The princess bows to her father and says that it is time for him to look at the situation from a different point of view. The man asks his daughter to explain what she means. Ella tells the king that she was not involved in Tariq's death. The girl cheerfully says that although His Majesty will not believe her, in fact, she herself almost died then. The main character asks to be allowed to provide evidence of her words. The leader of the group of dancers, Carrie and Lark Nuo, enter the throne room. The princess orders those who entered to tell about everything they saw that day. Mo Tyler looks at his sister furiously, not understanding what this means. A traveling dancer introduces herself and her father to His Majesty. With tears in her eyes, the blonde says that Her Highness found them and said that they were eyewitnesses to the murder. However, according to Carrie, it was so long ago that she can't remember much. Tyler exhales nervously, mentally laughing at his sister that her people's perjury was unsuccessful. Ella orders the blonde to tell the truth, but her father pacifies her, telling her not to bully people. The man smiles politely, asking the girl not to be afraid and to tell it like it is. Carrie excitedly thanks His Majesty for his understanding. The dancer says that that day they actually caught what was happening, but by the time they arrived, only one man remained alive, and they did not even see the attacker. Ella is angry with the girl because she lies. To prove her words, Carrie runs up to the king, saying that the man left her a dying message. Not knowing about the message, the princess tries to take it from the blonde. However, this is prevented by His Majesty, who takes the item from the dancer. The man unwraps the package, and inside it is a bloody message and a silver medallion. The king opens the jewelry and sees that it contains a portrait of Prince Tariq. Tyler screams that it can't be this man, since the doctor determined that death was the result of a stab wound. Ella interrupts her older brother, saying that she is the one who can say how His Highness died. The heroine says that on that day, Tariq ordered to protect her from the attackers, and before she left, a sword pierced his chest, but he was still alive. The princess concludes that the doctor is either a charlatan or deliberately hid the truth, after which she asks her brother's opinion on this matter. Tyler senses a catch and looks at the blonde girl. Although Carrie's gaze is filled with sadness, the corners of her lips are raised upward. Noticing this, the first prince shouts that the dancer and his sister are in cahoots. His Majesty interrupts his son's scream, ordering him to be silent. The man carefully reads Tariq's message, after which he orders him to be left alone with Ella and Savale. Seeing that Tyler wants to object to his father, the Holy One reins him in with a glance. After everyone leaves the throne room, Chiron Adalante asks those remaining if they have read the letter. The heroes say that they did not even know about the existence of this message. His Majesty hands the paper to the sage and says that the prince would definitely not dare to tell them about the contents. After reading, the characters turn away from each other and embarrassedly say that this is slander. The king laughs at the reaction of his daughter and her lover, asking if they really believed that he knew nothing about their affair. The man says that he thought that everything would end after Ella's wedding, but her fiancé died in battle with the enemy. Savale asks in surprise why His Majesty is so confident in what is written here. In response to this, the king only brushes it off, saying that the heroes don't need to know about it. Ella tells Savale that she wants to find out if the killer really wore the symbol of the Holy See. The sage kneels and holds out the sword found at the scene, which he hid as soon as he saw the marks. The king runs his hand over the blade, which has a cross on it. Chiron Adalante praises the heroes for a job well done and asks them not to interfere anymore or tell anyone anything. The princess arrives at the sage's residence, where she is greeted by a worried dancer. Ella happily hugs Carrie and says she was incredible in the throne room. The sage also praises the blonde and asks the girls to keep their distance. Savale turns to the heroine, saying that he really didn't expect her to be able to convince the king of Scipia to cooperate with them. The princess smiles awkwardly and says that it's all about sincerity. When Ella was wounded on the cheek with a sword, she told the ruler of Scipia that her words hurt him, so he decided to hide it behind anger. The princess noticed that while everyone was talking about how dearly the king loved his son, his actions seemed the height of justice. Hearing this, the man lowered his sword with his hand trembling with anger. The enraged ruler asked the girl if Sawwale's true goal was to piss off the king. Her Highness is surprised that His Majesty guessed their goal so quickly. However, thanks to a novel about the struggle for power, the heroine knows that all kings are suspicious and difficult to deceive. The princess looks away and says that she does not understand what the ruler is talking about. His Majesty understands that if he kills the girl now, he will either be forced to support the side opposite to the sage, or he will pay for his action. Ella knows that the king will not change his choice in any case, because he knows that the man who persuaded him to come and set up the ambush was Mo Tyler. That is why Her Highness is sure that they will not kill her, but on the contrary, they will want to listen to their plan. After the heroine's story, Carrie admiringly says that the ruler of Scipia himself thought through the course of action and agreed to falsify the evidence. The sage looms over the princess and asks her if she was really going to put her life at risk. Ella smiles nervously and claims that, of course, this is not true. The girl says that the king believed that she was Sawwale's man and therefore would not spoil the relationship. After the heroine's words, the sage smiles contentedly, but Ella does not understand the reason for the sudden change in emotions. The embarrassed dancers smile and decide to leave the room so as not to disturb the couple. Suddenly, the girl realizes what she just said. The princess pulls the blushing sage towards her and says that he has outsmarted her. Sawile blankly asks the heroine if he did something wrong. Ella says everything is fine and leans forward, kissing the man. Mo Tyler furiously breaks a vase that was recently on the table in his office. The first prince says his sister's name through clenched teeth. A divine messenger enters the room and suggests that they think about how to save the situation instead of showing senseless rage. Tyler screams that all this happened because of Tharion, who did not support him. The messenger reminds her that without the Holy See, the prince would not have the right to simply stand in front of her. The man warns that the Holy One is giving Tyler one last chance because he is not irreplaceable. After this, Tharion hands over the golden vessel to His Highness. After 3 days of negotiations between the rulers, the month-long war ended. However, ancient Adalante had a hard time experiencing the crisis that had begun. In the throne room, His Majesty gathered his children and the sage to tell him something. Mo Tyler asks his father if the Holy One should be present with them, since the man called them about the truce. Ella teases her brother, saying that the dog is upset due to the absence of its owner. The first prince shouts at his sister not to overstep her bounds, to which the heroine says, in the same tone, that it is not for him to decide who will be present at meetings with the king. Realizing that this could offend the ruler, Tyler begins to make excuses, but is silenced by His Majesty. Chiron tells those present that he has promised to find and punish Tariq's killers, and Scipia's ambassadors have been left to monitor the progress of the case. The man turns to Kalium, instructing him to find the culprit. The younger prince, Terence, is ordered by the ruler to take care of the well-being and comfort of the envoys. Chiron asks his daughter to rest a little and then get down to work on post-war reconstruction. Mo Tyler looks at his sister in surprise, not understanding how she managed to unite people so successfully. The prince tries to challenge his father's decisions, but he ignores him, asking the sage to help the princess with this matter. His Highness tries to object again, but falls silent when the king looks at him reproachfully. Chiron Adalante says that lately there has been talk about bandits, so Tyler and the people from the Order should check everything. The first prince humbly says that the order will be carried out. The heroes return to the room, and the tired Ella falls on the sofa, after which she asks the terms of cooperation with the king of Scipia. Savale says that the ruler agreed to peace if everyone involved in Tariq's death is executed. The man carefully picks up the girl's shoes that have fallen off. Her Highness happily says that they have a better chance of winning. Princesses enthusiastically wants to ask for something, but Vale stops her, telling her not to even try. Ella turns away offended, but the sage grabs her hand, asking her to turn back. The man places a pillow on his legs, inviting Her Highness to lie down on it. The heroine, after a little thought, puts her head on the pillow, smiling contentedly. Vale reminds the princess that the king has given a good opportunity to increase her reputation, so she should take advantage of it. Mo Tyler arrives at the place where His Majesty directed him. The man quietly throws to the ground the very vessel that the divine messenger gave him. The main character visits a village outside the city. Ella shouts to the villagers to keep in line as there is enough food for everyone. Aisha asks that this be left to them, since Her Highness has visited a dozen settlements in recent days. The princess says that she is fine, and that this is the last village nearby, after which they will take a break. Another reason for Ella's hard work is that she doesn't want to be told by one person that she is lazy. The heroine offendedly turns her head away from the sage, who does not understand anything. Suddenly, the princess hears that people are starting to get angry because someone is not keeping the line. A black-haired woman runs with a child in her arms and begs Her Highness to help him. Seeing the boy's condition, Ella asks Aisha to call a doctor. The heroine touches the child's forehead and notices that he is very hot. Suddenly, the girl notices some bubbles on the boy's collarbone. The girl pulls aside his shirt and sees that his whole body is covered with this rash. Behind Ella, there is a doctor who is horrified to see the boy's condition and fearfully says that it is smallpox. The man immediately runs away, shouting that the child has traces of a viral infection. Panic begins around, and all the residents run away in horror from this place. The sage holds Ella close to him and shouts to his people to block the exit. The princess asks the man in confusion what is happening. Sawile shouts to the girl that that boy is sick. Suddenly, Her Highness remembers that at this time there is no cure for this disease yet, and those who became infected could only wait for death. Ella turns to the sage and asks what he is going to do. Vale doesn't answer anything and just looks at the heroine seriously. Then the princess realizes that the man plans to destroy the village to prevent the disease from spreading. Ella turns away from the sage and tells Aisha to tear the fabric into several strips to cover her nose and mouth and find strong wine. Ash-haired asks the girl what she is up to. Her Highness makes a mask from the fabric of her dress and shouts that she wants to show everyone that smallpox is not invincible. The princess wraps her hands with the same material, making something like gloves. Ella asks Aisha to take the mother and child with her. Hearing these words, the maid's face shows horror. The heroine tells the girl to find a room where these people can be accommodated, clean it up, and wait until they are settled. The princess tells the villagers to protect themselves the same way she did, and then everyone will return to the capital safe. Ella asks 5 people to treat every corner of the village with alcohol, and the rest to check their bodies and take the infected to an isolated place. The heroine lifts the sick child to take him and his mother to their temporary place of residence. A girl with light red hair looks at the princess with concern. The village resident tears her dress and does as Her Highness indicated, and then volunteers as the first volunteer. The girl with blue hair and the man do exactly the same as the previous one. After that, a couple more people volunteer. Savail orders Felix to return to the capital immediately and make sure no rumors spread before they return. Aisha calls the princess and says that the village residents have followed all her orders. The maid says that there are a total of 173 people in the settlement, 31 of whom are sick. Ella asks the girl to help her find the infected cow. A sage approaches Her Highness and says that there is a more suitable person for such a task. After a while, the ash-haired man brings that same cow to the square. The heroine looks at the animal's udder and notices that it has that same rash. Ella happily says that it's time for vaccination and asks everyone to come up and touch the bubbles on the cow's body. Residents fearfully ask why they should touch the rash, since this will cause them to become infected, but Her Highness says that this is what needs to be achieved. People start screaming that the main character is going to kill everyone and then burn the village. Residents are trying to resist and leave the protected circle. The sage looks at the princess with concern. Without saying anything, Ella cuts her finger and begins to bleed. Then the girl touches the udder with the wound so that the disease is transmitted to her through the blood. Savail, horrified, tries to stop Her Highness, but it is too late. The sage grabs the heroine's hand, but she tries to calm him down, saying that everything is fine. Ella shouts to the people that this is only a way to prevent an epidemic, and if they do not believe in her good intentions, she asks them to believe that her life is dear to her. Ash-haired decides to support the girl and does the same thing as her. The sage shouts that Her Highness would not deceive the villagers at such a price. Aisha says that she trusts the princess and begins to climb the stairs towards the cow. The rest of the main character's subjects follow the example of the maid. After this, the others also gain faith, standing in line at the cow. Ella exhales with relief, glad that everything worked out. A few days later, the princess looks at her skin, where traces of blisters can be seen from the vaccination. A joyful Aisha comes running into Her Highness's room and tells the main character that no one has gotten sick again. The girl says that they made the medicine according to Ella's prescription, and the wards are sanitized every day. The princess happily says that she can now return, to which Aisha expresses her concerns about the rumors. The heroine says that it is because of them that they need to return right now, to make it clear that the time has ended when it was possible to hide the true state of affairs. The cortege of Her Highness returns to Adalante, and people begin to talk about how she killed the entire village overnight when she learned about the illness. The townspeople discuss that they thought that the princess had become kinder, but they also saw even greater cruelty from her. Ella enters the throne room and greets her father. His Majesty asks his daughter if what people say is true. The main character tells the ruler that she actually contracted smallpox. Hearing this, the king jumps up in horror. The girl smiles and says that she did not kill anyone, but on the contrary, found a way to prevent the epidemic. At his daughter's words, the man freezes in place in disbelief. One of those present says that this is impossible, To which the princess retorts that if he cannot do something, this does not mean that everyone can. His Majesty asks his daughter to stop talking complete nonsense. An adjutant from the state of Sipi says that smallpox is rampant in their villages, so if there is a way to overcome it, the king can write off part of Adalante's debt. Villagers enter the hall and are asked to tell everything they know. One of the newcomers lifts his shirt sleeve and shows that there are traces of smallpox on his skin. The nobles begin to panic and shout for the infected to be removed from the premises. A villager says they were able to be cured with the help of a vaccine that will prevent them from getting infected again. The king still says it is impossible. However, the adjutant says that examination of residents showed that those who became infected are now in fact completely healthy. Ella asks her father to at least trust Ambassador Sapia, since he does not trust her. The adjutant says that his people are now heading to their country to report everything, and he is sure that Chiron will soon be satisfied with the answer. The king turns to the princess and says that she has done a great job, so she can ask for a reward for it. The heroine begins to say what she wants, but she is interrupted by someone's voice who thanks the god of health. Ella rolls her eyes, knowing that the person who entered was far from the only one planning to spread rumors. The holiness says that Her Highness was endowed with the ability to cure smallpox, and she should be grateful for this. To this, the princess only smiles politely, realizing that all the temples are located outside the city, so the man wants to send her away from the capital. The heroine, out of the corner of her eye, notices the sage's nod, who gives a sign for action. Then Ella turns to her father and joyfully says that she is ready to go and pray for her father and the people. After a while, the girl already finds herself in a carriage to go to the temple. Her Highness tries to convince the sage that he does not need to go with her, since it is only a 3-day visit and he is more needed here. However, the man does not calm down. Then the princess says that they will definitely not kill her during this time, since there are cities along the way. When Savale starts arguing with Ella again, the girl pulls him towards her and kisses him. The carriage moves from its place, and the main character finally asks the sage to be humble and obey her. Vale smiles contentedly, carefully touching his lips. Someone's loud cough echoes through the throne room, leaving blood on the handkerchief. Chiron Adalante sits alone on his throne, staring into space.